Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. What if the walls of your home aren't just listening, but speaking back? I've lived in Blackstone Towers for 3 years now. Apartment 712. It's nothing special, a one-bedroom unit in a 20-story concrete monolith that houses hundreds of people, yet somehow manages to make each of us feel utterly alone. The rent is reasonable, the location convenient, and until 2 weeks ago, I had no complaints. My name is Michael Fletcher. 32 years old, divorced, working as a graphic designer for a marketing firm downtown. Nothing remarkable about me, really. I'm the kind of person you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Perhaps that's why what's happening feels so targeted, so personal. It started with the tapping. 3 sharp raps against my bedroom wall at exactly 3:17 in the morning. I know the time because I jolted awake, heart hammering against my ribs, and immediately checked my phone. At first, I dismissed it. Old buildings settle. Pipes knock. Neighbors drop things. I pulled the covers tighter and tried to fall back asleep. The next night, 3:17 again. The same 3 taps, but slightly louder. I sat upright, straining to listen through the darkness. Apartment 713 was vacant, had been for months. The tenant before was an elderly woman who, according to building gossip, was taken to a nursing home after suffering some kind of breakdown. She claimed something was living in the walls. By the 3rd night, I was waiting, watching the glowing digits of my alarm clock as they ticked toward 3:17. My mouth went dry when the taps came, not from the bedroom wall this time, but from directly above my head. I stared at the ceiling, paralyzed, as a fine dusting of plaster drifted down onto my face. The 4th night brought something new. Not just taps, but a scratching sound, like fingernails dragging slowly across drywall. It moved across the ceiling in a deliberate pattern, starting at one corner and working its way across, then back, like someone pacing. Or searching. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly weak. "Is someone there?" The scratching stopped immediately. The silence that followed was somehow worse, a waiting, listening absence of sound. During the day, Blackstone Towers is unremarkable. People coming and going, nodding politely in elevators, collecting mail, living their separate lives. I began studying my neighbors, wondering if any of them heard it too. Mrs. Patel from 710 always had dark circles under her eyes. Was she being kept awake as well? The college kid in 714 had taken to wearing headphones constantly. Was he drowning out the sounds? I found myself lingering in the lobby, eavesdropping on conversations, hoping to catch some mention of strange noises. But everyone seemed normal, unconcerned. Only the building superintendent, Mr. Grayson, gave me pause. I caught him watching me from across the mailroom, his weathered face expressionless. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away and shuffled toward the maintenance elevator. Last Friday, I decided to knock on 713's door just to confirm it was empty. I stood there for several minutes, shifting my weight from one foot to the other, before finally raising my hand to knock. But before my knuckles could make contact, I heard something, a soft thud from inside, like something heavy being moved. I froze, my hand still raised. Hello? I called, pressing my ear to the door. Is someone in there? Nothing. No sound, no movement. I tried the handle and found it locked. Of course it would be. I was being ridiculous. As I turned to go, I noticed something on the floor, a small, dark smudge leading from beneath 713's door into the hallway. I crouched down to examine it. It looked like ash, but finer, almost powdery. I touched it with my fingertip and immediately recoiled. It was warm. That night, the tapping began earlier, at 2:45. It moved around the apartment, from wall to wall, ceiling to floor, in no discernible pattern. Just random enough to keep me from anticipating where it would come from next. My heart raced with each new tap, my skin prickling with cold sweat. Then, at exactly 3:17, everything stopped. The sudden silence was jarring. I sat up in bed, ears straining, eyes scanning the darkened room. The red numbers of my clock seemed to pulse in the darkness. That's when I noticed the smell, faint at first, then growing stronger. Like burnt hair and something metallic, almost like blood. It seemed to be coming from the air vent near the ceiling. I got up, legs unsteady, and approached the vent. Standing on my tiptoes, I peered into the darkness of the metal grate. The smell was definitely stronger here, making my eyes water. And then I saw them, a pair of eyes, bloodshot and wide, staring back at me from the darkness of the ventilation shaft. I stumbled backward, knocking over my nightstand. The lamp crashed to the floor, plunging the room into complete darkness. I scrambled for my phone, fingers trembling as I turned on the flashlight. The beam illuminated the vent. Empty now. Just a dark, rectangular opening in the wall. But the tapping had started again, this time from inside my closet. And it wasn't tapping anymore. It was scratching, clawing. Something wanted out. Or wanted in. I haven't slept properly since. The noises continue, growing more varied, more insistent. Sometimes I hear what sounds like whispering, too faint to make out words, but with the unmistakable cadence of human speech. It follows me from room to room, always just behind the walls, just above the ceiling, just below the floor. Yesterday, I ran into Mr. Grayson again. This time, I confronted him. Is there something wrong with this building? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Something you're not telling the tenants? His face remained impassive, but I noticed how his gnarled hands tightened around the ring of keys he always carried. Buildings this old, he said finally, his voice as dry as autumn leaves, they absorb things over time. Memories. Emotions. He looked up at me, his pale eyes suddenly sharp. Pain. He shuffled past me toward the elevator, then paused and looked back. Apartment 713, he said. It's been empty for a reason. We can't keep anyone in there. Not since the incident. What incident? I asked, but the elevator doors were already closing, leaving me alone with my questions and the growing certainty that whatever was happening in Blackstone Towers, it wasn't just in my head. Tonight, I've barricaded my bedroom door with my dresser. I've stuffed towels into the air vent. I've wedged a chair under my closet door handle. The clock reads 3:12. 5 minutes to go. I can already hear it starting, a soft, almost tentative tapping from somewhere inside the walls. It knows I'm listening. It knows I'm afraid. And I think it's getting closer. Morning came with merciful brightness, scattering the shadows that had tormented me throughout the night. I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, staring at the wall that separated my apartment from 713. The tapping had continued until precisely 4:33, then stopped with such abruptness that the silence felt like a physical presence. I called in sick to work. The thought of returning to my apartment after dark made my stomach clench with dread. I needed answers before nightfall. The building's management office was located on the ground floor, a small, sterile space with fluorescent lighting that buzzed incessantly. A young woman with perfectly straight hair and a practiced smile sat behind the desk. "How can I help you?" she asked without looking up from her computer. "I need information about apartment 713, I said, my voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. Just for a moment, a barely perceptible hesitation, but it was enough to confirm my suspicions. Something was wrong with that apartment. "What kind of information?" she asked, still not meeting my eyes. "Who lived there before? What happened to them? Why has it been empty for so long?" She finally looked up, her smile still in place but not reaching her eyes. "I'm afraid I can't disclose information about other tenants, Mr. Fletcher. Michael Fletcher, apartment 712. I leaned forward. "Something's happening in my apartment. Strange noises. Smells. I think it's coming from next door." Her smile faltered. "Have you filed a maintenance request? Perhaps there's an issue with the plumbing or—" "It's not plumbing," I interrupted, desperation making me bold. "Something is in the walls. And I think Mr. Grayson knows what it is." At the mention of the superintendent, something flickered across her face, fear, perhaps, or recognition. She glanced toward a closed door behind her, then lowered her voice. "Mr. Grayson has been with Blackstone Towers for over 40 years. He has his own ways of dealing with building issues." She pulled a notepad toward her and wrote something down. "I can't help you officially, but—" She slid the note across the desk. It contained a name, Elizabeth Chambers, followed by an address at a nearby nursing home. "The previous tenant," she murmured. "She might be able to tell you more." She straightened up, voice returning to its professional tone. "Now, I'll be happy to file that maintenance request for you." I pocketed the note, thanked her, and left. As the door closed behind me, I heard the lock click into place. The West Grove Nursing Home was a 40-minute drive from Blackstone Towers. A sprawling, one-story building surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens. It looked peaceful, welcoming, the opposite of what I had expected. The receptionist directed me to a sunroom at the back of the facility, where residents were gathered for afternoon activities. I spotted her immediately, a thin woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, sitting alone by a window. Unlike the other residents, who were engaged in crafts or conversation, Elizabeth Chambers stared fixedly at the wall, her hands folded in her lap. "Miss Chambers?" I approached cautiously. "My name is Michael Fletcher. I live in Blackstone Towers, in the apartment next to your old one." Her head turned slowly toward me, but her eyes seemed to look through rather than at me. Then, abruptly, they focused, sharp and clear. 712, she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "You've heard them, haven't you? The ones in the walls?" A chill ran down my spine. "Yes." "What are they, Miss Chambers? What's happening in that building?" She gestured to the chair opposite her. As I sat, I noticed her hands, covered with small, crescent-shaped scars. Like she had dug her nails into her palms, over and over again. "It started small," she said, gaze drifting back to the wall. Tapping. Scratching. I thought it was mice at first. A bitter smile twisted her lips. Maintenance came, found nothing. The noises continued. Grew louder. Started to sound deliberate. Did you see anything? I asked, thinking of the eyes I had glimpsed in the vent. Her focus snapped back to me. In the vents. In the mirrors. Just glimpses. Never while I was looking directly. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Do you know what was there before Blackstone Towers was built? I shook my head. A hospital. Not just any hospital, a psychiatric institution. Westcliff Asylum. Her fingers began to tap against her knee, an unconscious rhythm. They did terrible things there. Experiments. In the name of treatment. She looked down at her tapping fingers and forcibly stilled them. When they tore it down in the 1970s, they left the foundations. Built right on top of all that suffering. I thought of what Mr. Grayson had said about buildings absorbing emotions, memories, pain. But what is happening now? What's in the walls? Now what? Who? Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. They're still there, you see. The patients. The ones who never left. They're trapped between the old foundations and the new walls. And they're trying to get out. That's not possible, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew I didn't believe them. Not anymore. Elizabeth grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Apartment 713 is where it's strongest. It's a fulcrum point where the old building and the new one overlap most completely. That's why they can't keep it filled. People either leave or she stopped abruptly. Or they what? I pressed. They join the ones in the walls. Her gaze drifted to something over my shoulder. Oh, he's here for you already. I turned, half expecting to see some ghostly figure, but it was only Mr. Grayson standing in the doorway of the sunroom. Our eyes met, and he nodded slightly, as if confirming something to himself. Miss Chambers, he said, approaching us. I see you've met Mr. Fletcher. You knew I'd come here, I said. It wasn't a question. I figured you might. The management office doesn't give out information, but they're not above dropping hints. He pulled up a chair, the metal legs scraping loudly against the tile floor. Elizabeth was telling you about Westcliff, I assume. Elizabeth had withdrawn into herself again, staring vacantly at the wall, her moment of lucidity apparently past. Is it true? I asked. About the asylum? Yes. Though the official record says it was demolished completely. Grayson's face remained impassive. I've worked at Blackstone since it opened. Seen tenants come and go. Some stayed long term. Some don't last a week. Especially in 713. What happened there? The incident you mentioned? Grayson was quiet for a long moment. 2 months ago, a young woman moved in, graduate student named Olivia Wright. Kept to herself, mostly. After 3 weeks, the complaint started. Noises at night. Shouting. Neighbors called security, but when they got there, the apartment was empty. No sign of her. He rubbed his weathered hands together. Except for the walls. What about the walls? I asked, but part of me didn't want to know. She'd torn through them. All of them. Plaster, drywall, insulation ripped away. They found her tools, kitchen knives, a hammer she'd apparently borrowed from maintenance, even her bare hands in some places. He looked up at me. Never found her, though. Just the holes she'd made, leading into the spaces between apartments, into the building itself. I thought of the scratching I heard, the clawing sounds. Someone or something trying to get out. Or get in. Why are you telling me this? Why not warn tenants about what's happening? You think people would believe it? You think you would have believed it before you started hearing them yourself? Grayson shook his head. Besides, it doesn't affect everyone. Some people live their entire lives at Blackstone without experiencing anything unusual. It's only certain apartments, certain people. Like me, I said quietly. And Miss Chambers. And Olivia Wright. And others before her. Grayson stood up. I can't tell you what to do, Mr. Fletcher. But if I were you, I'd start looking for a new place. Before it's too late. Too late for what? But Grayson was already walking away. At the door, he paused and looked back. The noises. When they stop completely, that's when you should worry. That's when they've found a way through. I sat with Elizabeth a while longer, but she remained unresponsive, lost in whatever private horror occupied her mind. Eventually, a nurse came to take her to dinner, and I was left alone in the rapidly darkening sunroom. By the time I drove back to Blackstone Towers, night had fallen. The building loomed against the sky, its countless windows illuminated from within, like I was watching my approach. For a moment, I considered driving past, finding a hotel for the night. But I needed my things if I was going to leave. And part of me, the stubborn, rational part, still wanted proof. Tangible evidence of what was happening. The elevator ride to the 7th floor seemed to take longer than usual. When the doors finally opened, the hallway stretched before me, eerily silent. I walked quickly to my apartment, key already in hand. As I passed 713, I noticed something, a faint, dark substance seeping from beneath the door. Like the ash I'd seen before, but more of it. Forming a small puddle that seemed to pulse slightly in the harsh fluorescent lighting. I hurried into my apartment, locking the door behind me. The silence was absolute. No tapping. No scratching. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing. I remembered Grayson's warning, when they stop completely, that's when you should worry. I moved through the apartment quickly, throwing essentials into a duffel bag. Clothes, toiletries, laptop. The bare minimum I would need for a few days away. I would come back during daylight to get the rest. As I zipped up the bag, I heard it, a soft, wet sound coming from the bathroom. Like something viscous dripping onto tile. I should have left immediately. I knew that. But I had to see. Had to know. The bathroom door was ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the gap. I pushed it open slowly, phone flashlight illuminating the small space. The mirror above the sink was covered in condensation, as if someone had just taken a hot shower. But instead of the random patterns that steam normally creates, there were words, finger-drawn in the moisture. We see you, Michael. And below it, something worse. A handprint, small, delicate, like a woman's, pressed against the glass from the other side. I backed away, bag clutched to my chest. The lights in the apartment flickered, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I heard it start again, the tapping. But different now. Coordinated. Rhythmic. coming from every wall simultaneously. Morse code, I realized. The same message over and over. Let us in. I fumbled for the door, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the knob. As I pulled it open, I glanced back one last time. A crack had appeared in the wall separating my apartment from 713. Thin at first, then widening as I watched, plaster crumbling away to reveal darkness beyond. And from that darkness, something emerged, a hand, pale and dirt-streaked, fingers unnaturally long, reaching toward me. I ran. I spent 3 nights in a motel on the outskirts of the city. A dingy place with flickering neon and paper-thin walls, but at least the only sounds coming through those walls were human arguments, laughter, the occasional moan of pleasure or pain. Normal sounds, comforting in their mundanity. I called in sick to work again, claiming a severe case of flu. My boss was understanding but concerned. I'd never missed work before, had always been reliable. Take care of yourself, Michael, he said. Health comes first. If only he knew what I was really trying to protect. By the 3rd day, I'd nearly convinced myself that what I'd experienced at Blackstone Towers was some kind of breakdown. Stress-induced hallucinations, perhaps. The power of suggestion after hearing those stories from Elizabeth Chambers and Mr. Grayson. I needed to go back, in daylight, and face my fears. Collect more of my belongings. Maybe even stay, if everything seemed normal. Rational thoughts for a rational world. But deep down, I knew. The world I thought I understood had cracked open like that wall, revealing something darker beneath. I arrived at Blackstone Towers just after noon. The lobby was busy with residents coming and going, normal weekday activity. No one seemed concerned or afraid. No indication that anything unnatural lurked within these walls. The elevator ride was uneventful. The 7th floor hallway, brightly lit and silent. I approached my door cautiously, knowing with relief that there was no dark substance seeping from under 713 today. Just a normal, empty apartment. My key turned smoothly in the lock. The door swung open on well-oiled hinges. Inside, everything appeared untouched since my hasty departure 3 nights ago. Dishes still in the sink. Bed unmade. The bathroom door still ajar. I stepped inside cautiously, half expecting the lights to flicker or the tapping to begin. But the apartment remained silent. Ordinary. The crack in the wall was gone. Or rather, it had never been there at all. The surface was smooth, unblemished. I ran my fingers over it, feeling nothing but flat paint and solid plaster beneath. The bathroom mirror showed no trace of the message or the handprint. Just my own reflection, pale and drawn, dark circles under my eyes. You're losing your mind, Michael, I told my reflection. It stared back at me, unconvinced. I began packing more of my things, winter clothes, books, the small collection of vinyl records I'd inherited from my father. As I worked, the sun moved across the sky, shadows lengthening as afternoon gave way to evening. I lost track of time, focused on the task at hand. When someone knocked on my door, I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Mr. Grayson, his weathered face unreadable as always. You came back, he said, not sounding particularly surprised. Just to get some things, I replied, though I'd been seriously considering staying the night. Daylight had emboldened me, made the terrors of 3 nights ago seem distant and improbable. Grayson nodded, glancing past me into the apartment. His gaze lingered on the wall separating 712 from 713. I suppose you didn't believe what I told you, he said finally. About Olivia Wright. About what happens in this building. I don't know what to believe anymore, I admitted. Nothing's happened since I've been back. No noises, no manifestations. It's still daylight, Grayson said simply. They're strongest at night, particularly between 3 and 4 in the morning. The dead time, some call it. Who are they, exactly? I asked. Elizabeth mentioned patients from the asylum, but it's more complicated than that. Grayson hesitated. There's something I want to show you, if you're interested in the truth. Part of me wanted to decline, to finish packing and leave Blackstone Towers forever. But a larger part, the part that couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen and heard, needed answers. Show me, I said. Grayson led me to the maintenance elevator at the end of the hall. Unlike the main elevators, this one required a key, which he produced from the ring he always carried. As the doors closed, he inserted the key into a slot below the regular buttons and turned it. A hidden panel slid open, revealing another button marked simply B3. There are only 2 basement levels on the building plans, I said, watching as he pressed the button. Officially, yes. The elevator began to descend, moving past the lobby, past B1 and B2, continuing downward. But when they built Blackstone Towers, they didn't completely demolish Westcliff Asylum. The lowest level was simply sealed off and built over. More cost-effective that way. The elevator slowed, then stopped with a metallic groan. The doors opened to reveal darkness, broken only by the dim light from the elevator car. Grayson produced a flashlight and stepped forward. Watch your step. And stay close. I followed him into the darkness, the elevator doors closing behind us with a finality that made my stomach clench. The flashlight beam illuminated a narrow corridor with concrete walls, the air thick with dust and the smell of damp earth. This was part of the sub-basement of Westcliff, Grayson explained, his voice echoing slightly. Where they kept patients who needed to be isolated. The violent ones? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Sometimes. But more often, the ones who saw things. Heard things. Who insisted that something was wrong with the very fabric of the building. He glanced back at me. Sound familiar? We continued down the corridor, our footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. The beam of the flashlight revealed doors on either side, heavy metal with small, barred windows. Most were closed, but occasionally we passed one that stood open, revealing small, cell-like rooms beyond. How do you know about all this? I asked. You said you've worked here since Blackstone opened, but that would have been 1978, Grayson finished. I was 23. My first job after coming home from Vietnam. He paused at a junction where the corridor split in 2 directions. But before that, my father worked at Westcliff. He was an orderly. Brought me with him sometimes when childcare fell through. I spent hours exploring these corridors while he worked. He chose the left path, leading us deeper into the labyrinth beneath Blackstone Towers. So you knew about this place when you took the job as superintendent. I knew about the place. Didn't know about the problem until later. After tenants started reporting noises. Disturbances. We stopped before a door larger than the others, its surface covered in faded markings, symbols I didn't recognize. This is what I wanted to show you. Grayson produced another key from his ring and inserted it into the lock. The door opened with a protesting creak, revealing a large, circular room beyond. He directed his flashlight upward, illuminating the ceiling, or rather, where the ceiling should have been. Instead, there was a complex lattice of pipes, conduits, and support beams, the underside of Blackstone Towers. This is directly beneath the central core of the building, Grayson explained, including the shaft that contains apartments 712 and 713. I looked up, trying to orient myself relative to my apartment, now many floors above. What was this room used for? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. They called it the treatment room. Grayson's voice had gone flat. But the patients called it something else. The mouth. He directed his flashlight toward the center of the room, where a large circular depression in the floor formed a pit about 10 feet across and 3 feet deep. The concrete within the pit was discolored, stained dark in a pattern that radiated outward from the center like a sunburst, or like something had exploded from within. What did they do here? I whispered. Officially? Experimental treatments for severe cases. Electroshock. Early attempts at lobotomy. Hydrotherapy, which is a nice way of saying they nearly drown patients in ice water to shock them back to sanity. Grayson circled the pit slowly. Unofficially, well, the records are incomplete. But there were rumors. My father would never talk about it directly, but he would wake up screaming sometimes. Said he could hear them calling to him. Hear who? The ones they couldn't save. The ones who went into the mouth and never really came out. He pointed his flashlight at the wall nearest to us, illuminating what I had initially taken for abstract graffiti. They were handprints. Dozens of them. Some large, some small, some barely more than smudges. All pressed into what must have once been wet concrete, now preserved for decades. Jesus, I breathed. Look closer, Grayson said. I stepped forward, examining the prints. Most seemed ordinary, 5 fingers, a palm. Human. But among them were others. Distorted. Elongated fingers. Too many digits. Shapes that only vaguely resembled hands at all. What am I looking at? I asked, though a terrible suspicion was already forming. Evidence, Grayson said simply, of what happened here. Of what's still happening. He turned to face me fully. Whatever they were doing in this room, it opened something. A door, maybe. Or tore a hole in whatever separates our world from others. You can't be serious. I am. And I think you know I am. His eyes were hard in the harsh beam of the flashlight. You've heard them. Maybe even seen them. The ones in the walls. They're trying to come through. Have been for decades. But why now? Why me? It comes in cycles. Gets stronger, then fades. Right now it's building again. He shone his light back toward the pit. And some people are more sensitive to it. More susceptible. People like you. Like Elizabeth Chambers. Like Olivia Wright. A horrible thought occurred to me. Is Olivia one of them now? In the walls? Grayson's silence was answer enough. How do I stop it? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. How do I make it leave me alone? You leave. Get as far from Blackstone Towers as you can. Never come back. He started toward the door. Or what? You find the source. Close whatever was opened. He gestured around the room. It started here. In the mouth. Whatever's trying to come through, whatever's trapped in between, it's focused on this spot. And the apartments directly above it. Apartments 712 and 713, I said, the pieces falling into place. That's why the disturbances are strongest there. Yes. Though 713 gets the worst of it. It's directly above the center of the pit. Grayson headed for the door. We should go. It's getting late, and you don't want to be down here after dark. As we turned to leave, a sound echoed through the room, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere above us. We both froze, looking up at the maze of pipes and conduits overhead. Is that, I began. Yes, Grayson cut me off. They know we're here. And they're getting active earlier than usual. He grabbed my arm. We need to go. Now. We hurried back through the corridors, the tapping following us, growing louder, more insistent. It seemed to come from all directions at once, from the pipes overhead, from behind the closed doors we passed, from the very walls themselves. By the time we reached the elevator, the tapping had become a cacophony, dozens, perhaps hundreds of unseen hands pounding against metal and concrete. The sound was deafening, maddening. Grayson fumbled with his keys, hands shaking as he tried to summon the elevator. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it did little to block the noise. And then, cutting through the chaos, a voice, thin and distant, but unmistakably human. Michael, it called. Michael, help me. I'm still here. I turned, staring down the dark corridor we had just traversed. Michael, please, the voice called again. It sounded like, but it couldn't be. Olivia? I called back, taking a step away from the elevator. Grayson grabbed me, yanking me back. Don't, he hissed. It's not her. Not anymore. The elevator arrived with a cheerful ding that seemed obscenely out of place amidst the cacophony. Grayson shoved me inside, following quickly. As the doors began to close, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the darkness of the corridor, a figure, slim and female, one hand outstretched toward us. For a split second, our eyes met, hers wide and desperate, filled with a terrible pleading. Then the doors closed, cutting off the sight but not the sound. The pounding followed us as the elevator ascended, gradually fading as we put distance between ourselves and the nightmare below. We rode in silence, both of us breathing heavily. When the elevator finally stopped at the lobby, Grayson turned to me. Get your things, he said. Leave tonight. Don't come back. But what about? There's nothing you can do for her. Or any of them. His face was grim. Save yourself while you still can. The doors opened, revealing the normality of the lobby, residents chatting, a delivery person with packages, the security guard at his desk. None of them aware of what lurked beneath their feet. Go, Grayson said, giving me a gentle push. And Michael? Don't tell anyone what you saw down there. They'll think you're crazy. A bitter smile twisted his lips. Believe me, I know. I nodded and stepped out, legs unsteady. As the doors closed behind me, I caught one last glimpse of Grayson's weathered face, his eyes haunted by what we'd both witnessed. Outside, the sun was setting, painting Blackstone towers in hues of blood red and deepening purple. I looked up at the building, counting the floors to where my apartment would be. 712. And beside it, 713, a dark window amidst the illuminated ones, like a missing tooth in a forced smile. I should have left then. should have heeded Grayson's warning and never looked back. But as I stood there, I couldn't stop thinking about the voice in the darkness. About the hand reaching out. About Olivia Wright, who had disappeared into the walls. And I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic and self-preservation, that I couldn't leave yet. Not without understanding more. Not without trying to help, if not Olivia, then at least myself. To end this nightmare once and for all. I returned to my apartment, moving quickly through the darkening halls. The tapping hadn't resumed, but every shadow seemed to harbor movement just at the edge of my vision. Every creak of the old building set my heart racing. I packed methodically, trying to focus on the mundane task rather than the horrors I'd witnessed. Clothes in one bag, electronics and valuables in another. I worked with one eye on the clock, determined to be gone before midnight, let alone the dreaded hour of 3:17. As I was zipping up the final bag, my phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Silence on the other end. Then, very faintly, the sound of tapping. Who is this? I demanded, fear giving way to anger. Michael. A woman's voice, distant and distorted, as if speaking through layers of static. You saw me. In the basement. My blood ran cold. Olivia? Yes. No. I don't know anymore. Her voice faded in and out. They're all around me. In the walls. In the spaces between. They want to get out, Michael. And they're using me to do it. Using you how? Olivia, where are you? 7:13. The words were barely audible. They led me into the walls, and now I can't find my way out. But I can still reach the apartment. Tonight. At 3:17. A pause, filled with the sound of her ragged breathing. Help me, Michael. Please. The call ended abruptly. I stared at the phone, my hand shaking. It had to be a trick, a lure to draw me in. And yet, what if it wasn't? What if Olivia Wright was still alive, trapped somewhere in the building's hidden spaces? Could I really walk away, knowing I might have been able to help her? I looked at my packed bags, then at the wall separating my apartment from 713. The decision, I realized, had already been made. I would stay. One more night. And at 3:17, I would go to apartment 713. Either I would save Olivia Wright, or I would join her in the walls. I sat in darkness, watching the minutes tick by on my phone. 2:45. 2:46. The silence in my apartment was absolute, no tapping, no scratching, no whispers from the walls. Just the sound of my own breathing, too loud in the stillness. I had spent the hours since receiving the call preparing as best I could. I'd found a small crowbar in my toolbox, a housewarming gift I'd never used until now. It felt reassuringly solid in my hand, both tool and potential weapon. I'd also gathered a powerful flashlight, extra batteries, and, feeling slightly ridiculous, a crucifix that my Catholic grandmother had given me years ago. I wasn't religious, but I figured it couldn't hurt. At 3 o'clock exactly, I left my apartment. The hallway was dimly lit and deserted, my footsteps echoing on the worn carpet as I approached 713. I stood before the door, hand raised to knock, when I noticed something strange, a thin line of light visible beneath the door. Someone had turned on a lamp inside. I knocked gently. Olivia? I called, keeping my voice low. "It's Michael from next door." No response. The light beneath the door flickered slightly, as if someone had passed between it and my line of sight. I tried the handle. Locked, of course. I glanced up and down the hallway, ensuring I was alone, then wedged the crowbar into the jamb near the lock. One sharp pull, and the door swung open with a crack of splintering wood. I stepped inside, crowbar raised defensively. Apartment 713 was laid out as a mirror image of my own, same floor plan, same generic furnishings, but there the similarities ended. Where my apartment was lived in, personal, this space was barren. No pictures on the walls, no books on the shelves. Just empty surfaces gathering dust. Except for the walls. Every wall was covered in markings, hundreds, perhaps thousands of them. Some appeared to be writing in a language I didn't recognize, with sharp, angular characters that hurt my eyes to look at directly. Others were crude drawings, stick figures with too many limbs, doorways leading to nowhere, spirals that seemed to twist in impossible ways. And there were handprints. Dozens of them, pressed into the drywall as if it had been soft clay rather than solid plaster. The same impossible handprints I had seen in the basement, some human, some not. The lamp I'd seen from outside sat on the floor in the center of the living room, a simple desk lamp, its cord snaking toward an outlet but not plugged in. Yet it glowed with a pale, bluish light that cast long shadows across the marked walls. "Olivia?" I called again, taking a tentative step forward. The lamp flickered, then brightened. The shadows on the walls seemed to move independently of my movements, stretching and contracting like living things. I heard it then, soft at first, then growing steadily louder. The tapping. But it wasn't coming from inside the walls this time. It was coming from inside the apartment itself. From the closed bedroom door at the end of the short hallway. 3 sharp raps. Pause. 3 more. The same pattern I'd first heard 2 weeks ago. I checked my phone. 3:15. 2 minutes to go. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to leave, to run back to my apartment, grab my bags, and flee this cursed building forever. But I had come this far. And Olivia, if it really was Olivia, had asked for my help. I approached the bedroom door slowly, crowbar in one hand, flashlight in the other. The tapping continued, growing more insistent with each step I took. 3:16. The bedroom door began to vibrate slightly with the force of the tapping from within. I reached for the handle. 3:17. The tapping stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. I pushed the door open, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness beyond. The bedroom was empty. No furniture, no curtains on the windows. Just bare walls covered in the same strange markings as the living room. And in the center of the room, a hole, jagged and rough-edged, as if someone had clawed their way through the floor. It was about 3 feet in diameter, perfectly circular, and so deep that my flashlight couldn't illuminate the bottom. I approached it cautiously, crouching at the edge to peer inside. The beam of my flashlight revealed only more darkness, as if the hole absorbed light rather than reflected it. "Olivia?" I called down into the darkness. "Are you down there?" My voice echoed strangely, coming back distorted, as if the space below was vast and empty. Then, faintly, I heard it, a voice calling back. "Michael." "You came." It was her. The same voice from the phone call. "Where are you?" "I can't see you." "Down here. In the in-between place. You have to come down." It's the only way to reach me. I stared into the abyss, every instinct warning me against what I was considering. How do I know this isn't a trap? I called. A pause. Then, you don't. But I'm running out of time, Michael. They're getting stronger. Soon they'll take over completely, and I'll just be another voice in the walls. I thought of Elizabeth Chambers sitting catatonic in the nursing home, of Mr. Grayson's warnings, of the handprints in the concrete of the basement room. If I come down, I said, how do we get back out? Another pause, longer this time. I don't know if we can, Olivia's voice admitted finally. But staying here is worse. Trust me. I sat back on my heels, weighing my options. This was madness. Complete insanity. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant to be here. That somehow, this moment had been inevitable from the first tap I'd heard through my bedroom wall. Okay, I said, more to myself than to Olivia. I'm coming down. I secured the flashlight in my pocket and gripped the crowbar tightly. Then, with a deep breath, I lowered myself into the hole, feet first, using my free hand to brace against the edge. The descent was longer than I expected. The wall of the hole felt strange against my palm, not like plaster or wood or concrete, but something else entirely. Something organic, almost membranous. I tried not to think about it as I lowered myself further into the darkness. Finally, my feet touched solid ground. I pulled out my flashlight and swept the beam around, trying to get my bearings. I stood in a narrow passageway with walls that curved overhead to form a tunnel about 6 feet high. The surfaces weren't made of any building material I recognized. They seemed to be composed of a dark, fibrous substance that glistened wetly in the beam of my flashlight. The floor beneath my feet was similar but firmer, with a slight give to it, like walking on packed earth. The air was thick and humid, with an unpleasant metallic smell that reminded me of blood. It was warmer down here than any apartment above, almost feverishly so. Olivia? I called, my voice sounding muffled in the close confines of the tunnel. This way, her voice replied from somewhere ahead. Follow the tunnel. It'll lead you to me. I began walking, keeping one hand on the crowbar and the other holding the flashlight. The tunnel twisted and turned, branching occasionally. At each junction, I paused, calling out to Olivia. Her voice always came from ahead, guiding me deeper into the labyrinth. As I walked, I became aware of sounds around me, not the tapping I'd grown accustomed to, but softer, more disturbing noises. Whispers just below the threshold of comprehension. The soft squish of movement within the walls of the tunnel. Once, I distinctly heard what sounded like a child's laughter, high and wild, from somewhere off to my left. I walked for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The tunnel gradually widened, the ceiling rising until I no longer needed to duck my head. Eventually, it opened into a larger space, a chamber perhaps 20 feet across, with multiple tunnels branching off in different directions. In the center of the chamber stood Olivia Wright. She was small and slight, with dark hair that hung lank around a pale face. She wore what had once been ordinary clothes, jeans and a sweater, now torn and filthy. Her feet were bare and caked with a dark substance I tried not to identify. But it was her eyes that truly frightened me, wide and dark, with a wild, desperate look that reminded me of a trapped animal. You actually came, she said, her voice hoarse. I wasn't sure you would. Are you all right? I asked, taking a step toward her. Are you hurt? She laughed, a brittle sound that echoed unnervingly in the chamber. Hurt? No, not physically. But I'm not all here anymore. She tapped her temple. They getting your head down here. Whispering. Showing you things. Making you forget who you are. I glanced around the chamber, suddenly very aware of the multiple exits. We need to get out of here. Can you show me the way back? Olivia's face fell. There is no way back. Not the way you came. She gestured to the tunnels around us. This place, it changes. Shifts. The paths you take never lead back to where they started. Then how do we get out at all? Through. She pointed to one of the tunnels, larger than the others, its entrance pulsing slightly, as if breathing. We have to go deeper. To the heart. To the mouth. A chill ran through me. The mouth? You mean that room in the basement? With the pit? That's just a reflection. An echo. Olivia stepped closer, her movements jerky, uncoordinated. The real mouth is down here. In the in-between place. And it's opening, Michael. Wider every day. Opening to what? To somewhere else. Somewhere they want to come from. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They'd been trying for so long. Decades. But the barrier was too strong. Until recently. What changed? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I knew the answer. Me. You. Elizabeth. Others before us. Olivia's eyes gleamed in the beam of my flashlight. They need someone on this side. Someone sensitive. Someone who can hear them, feel them. To act as a conduit. A door, I said quietly, remembering what Mr. Grayson had told me. Yes. And I've been opening it, bit by bit. Not willingly, not at first. But now. She smiled, and there was something wrong with her mouth, too wide, too many teeth. Now I understand what an honor it is. I took a step back, raising the crowbar slightly. Olivia, listen to me. This isn't you talking. It's them. Whatever they are, they're using you. We need to. Fight it, she interrupted. Close the door? Is that what you were going to say? She laughed again, and this time the sound had an echo that wasn't produced by the chamber. As if multiple voices were laughing from the same mouth. You don't understand yet, Michael. But you will. She gestured to the pulsing tunnel entrance. Come. Let me show you. She turned and walked toward the tunnel, her movements becoming more fluid, more graceful, and somehow less human with each step. I stood frozen, torn between following her into what was certainly a trap and trying to find my own way back. But if what she said was true, there was no way back. Only through. And perhaps, if I could reach the center of this nightmare, this mouth, I could find a way to close it. To end what had started decades ago in the basement of Westcliff Asylum. I tightened my grip on the crowbar and followed Olivia into the pulsing darkness. The tunnel beyond was different from the others, wider, taller, and lined with what looked disturbingly like striated muscle tissue. The floor sloped gently downward, taking us deeper beneath Blackstone Towers. The air grew warmer, the metallic smell stronger. Olivia moved ahead of me with unsettling grace, occasionally glancing back to ensure I was following. Her eyes caught the light of my flashlight and reflected it back, golden and animalistic. Where are they? I asked as we walked. The ones in the walls. What do they want? To escape, Olivia replied simply. They've been trapped between for so long. Neither here nor there. Neither alive nor dead. Caught in the moment of transition. She ran her hand along the wall of the tunnel, fingers sinking slightly into the membranous surface. They were patients once. At Westcliff. The experiments opened their minds too far. They began to perceive things beyond normal reality. And then they began to slip through. Slip through to where? To the spaces between. The forgotten places. She looked back at me. But they couldn't fully cross over. Neither could they return to their bodies. So they'd been here, in the walls, in the foundations. Watching. Waiting. Growing stronger. A smile spread across her face. And now they're ready. Ready for what? But she didn't answer, just continued walking, humming softly to herself, a melody I didn't recognize, atonal and discordant. We walked in silence after that, the only sounds our footsteps on the soft floor and the occasional wet, organic noise from within the walls. The tunnel continued to slope downward, spiraling gradually like a massive corkscrew. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel ended abruptly, opening into a vast chamber that took my breath away. It was enormous, far larger than should have been possible beneath a building like Blackstone Towers. The ceiling arched high overhead, lost in darkness despite my powerful flashlight. The walls curved inward, forming a perfect circle hundreds of feet across. And in the center, a pit, just like the one in the basement room, but many times larger. It pulsed with a dull, reddish light that seemed to come from deep within. Surrounding the pit were figures, dozens of them. Some appeared human, standing motionless, their faces turned toward the light. Others were less defined, their forms shifting and flowing like smoke given momentary substance. And still others were clearly not human at all, with elongated limbs, too many joints, faces that were only approximately faces. They all turned as we entered, a silent, synchronized movement that sent ice down my spine. I brought him, Olivia announced, her voice suddenly louder, more confident. The final key. The last door. The figures made no sound, but I felt rather than heard their approval, a wave of satisfaction that washed over me, leaving me nauseated and dizzy. Olivia, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. This isn't right. These things, they're not what they're pretending to be. They're not trapped patients. They're something else. Of course they are, she replied, turning to face me. Her features seemed to be shifting subtly, becoming less defined, as if she were beginning to merge with the entities around us. They were human once, yes. But they've become more. And soon, we will too. She extended her hand toward me. Join us, Michael. Be part of something greater. Help us open the final door. I stared at her outstretched hand, then at the pit beyond. The reddish light had intensified, pulsing in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. And from within that light, I could see movement, massive shapes stirring, reaching upward. Whatever was down there, it wasn't trying to escape from the building. It was trying to escape from somewhere else. Somewhere beyond. And it was using the trapped, transformed patients of Westcliff as tools, as lures, as doors. I thought of Elizabeth Chambers, her mind broken by what she had experienced. Of Mr. Grayson, trying to warn tenants away without revealing the full horror of what he knew. Of all the people who had lived briefly in apartment 713, only to flee or disappear. And I knew what I had to do. I raised the crowbar, not as a weapon against Olivia, but as a tool. "I'm sorry," I said, meeting her increasingly inhuman gaze. "But the door needs to be closed. Permanently." Before she could react, I turned and ran, not back the way we had come, but toward the pit itself. The figures surrounding it moved to intercept me, their forms flowing across the ground faster than should have been possible. But I had surprise on my side and desperation. I reached the edge of the pit and looked down into the pulsing redness. At this proximity, I could see that the light came from symbols carved into the stone sides of the pit, the same strange angular writing that had covered the walls of apartment 713. They glowed with an internal fire, their pattern forming a spiral that descended into depths I couldn't fathom. A door, indeed, but one that opened both ways. The crowbar felt hot in my hand, vibrating slightly as if in the presence of a powerful magnetic field. Without fully understanding what I was doing, but driven by an instinct that felt older than conscious thought, I began to strike at the symbols nearest the edge of the pit. The reaction was immediate and violent. The moment metal connected with the first glowing symbol, a shriek filled the chamber, not a human sound, not even an animal one. It was the sound of reality itself protesting violation. The entities converged on me, their forms stretching and twisting as they abandoned any pretense of humanity. I caught glimpses of too many eyes, too many mouths, limbs that bent in impossible directions. But I didn't stop. I continued striking at the symbols, feeling each one shatter under the crowbar with a sensation like breaking glass. With each symbol destroyed, the reddish light dimmed slightly, and the shrieking intensified. Something grabbed me from behind, Olivia, or what had once been Olivia. Her fingers dug into my shoulder with inhuman strength, trying to pull me away from the pit. "Stop," she hissed, her voice overlaid with others, a chorus of desperation. "You'll trap us all." I twisted free, using the crowbar to push her back. "That's the idea," I gasped, returning my attention to the symbols. The chamber had begun to shake, dust and debris raining down from the unseen ceiling. The walls themselves seemed to be contracting, the vast space shrinking as if the very structure was collapsing in on itself. The entities moved with increasing frenzy, their forms becoming more chaotic, less defined. Some seemed to be trying to escape, flowing back toward the tunnels. Others pressed closer, determined to stop me. I worked methodically, destroying symbol after symbol, watching as the red light faded to a dull glow, then to almost nothing. The pit itself seemed to be closing, its diameter shrinking as the walls of the chamber contracted. When I struck the final symbol, the crowbar passing through it like a hot knife through butter, everything stopped. The shrieking cut off. The shaking ceased. The entities froze in place, their forms suddenly rigid. Then, with a sound like an indrawn breath, the chamber imploded. The walls rushed inward, the ceiling descended, and the pit snapped shut like a colossal mouth. I felt myself falling, tumbling through darkness that was suddenly solid, pressing in from all sides. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't move. I was being crushed, absorbed, erased. My last conscious thought was that I had succeeded, but at the cost of my own existence. I had closed the door, but I was trapped on the wrong side. Then, nothing. I woke to the steady beep of a heart monitor and the antiseptic smell of a hospital room. Sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting striped shadows across white sheets and pale blue walls. For several minutes, I simply lay there, trying to reconcile my surroundings with my last memories, the collapsing chamber, the closing pit, the sensation of being crushed into non-existence. None of it seemed compatible with the quiet normalcy of this hospital room. A nurse entered, her cheerful demeanor faltering slightly when she saw I was awake. Mr. Fletcher, she said, recovering quickly. Good to see you back with us. I'll let the doctor know. How long? My voice was a rasp, my throat dry and painful. You've been with us for 8 days. She poured a cup of water and helped me drink. You were found unconscious in the basement of your apartment building. Do you remember what happened? I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Not truthfully, at least. The doctor arrived shortly after, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She checked my vitals, examined my pupils, asked me to follow her finger with my eyes. You're recovering well, she said finally. Physically, at least. You had a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a fractured wrist. She gestured to my left arm, which I now noticed was in a cast. But the CT scan showed no intracranial bleeding, and your other injuries are healing nicely. What happened to me? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the official explanation. According to the report, there was a structural collapse in an unauthorized area of your building's basement. You were found in the debris by the superintendent. She paused, studying me. Mr. Grayson. He's been by to check on you several times. Has he? I wasn't sure whether to be comforted or concerned by that information. Yes. He seemed quite worried about you. She made a note in my chart. He also mentioned that you were in the process of moving out when the accident occurred. Said he's been keeping your belongings safe until you're released. So Grayson was covering for me, creating a plausible story for my injuries. I wondered how much of what had really happened he knew or suspected. When can I leave? I asked. Another day or 2, if your condition continues to improve. She hesitated. Mr. Fletcher, I should mention that we've consulted with psychiatric services. Given the circumstances of your accident and some things you said while sedated, we feel it might be beneficial for you to speak with someone. Things I said? A cold feeling spread through my chest. What things? You were quite agitated at times. Talking about people on the walls. About a pit and symbols and doors opening to somewhere else. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the concern behind it. It's not uncommon for traumatic injuries to cause confusion or hallucinations. I see, I said quietly. And if I decline to speak with psychiatric services? That's your right, of course. But I would strongly recommend it. I nodded, not committing either way. Thank you, doctor. I'll think about it. After she left, I lay back, staring at the ceiling. 8 days. 8 days since I had followed Olivia right into the darkness beneath Blackstone Towers. 8 days since I had closed what she called the final door. Had it worked? Was it really over? Or had I simply delayed whatever was trying to come through? And what about Olivia herself? And the others, the transformed patients of Westcliff Asylum, trapped in the walls for decades? Had they been destroyed when the chamber collapsed? Or merely contained once more? I had no answers, and I wasn't sure where to find them. Except, perhaps, from Mr. Grayson. As if summoned by my thoughts, there was a knock at the door, and the man himself entered. He looked older than I remembered, more worn, the lines in his withered face deeper. You're awake, he said simply, taking a seat in the visitor's chair. Good. You found me, I said. In the basement. What was left of it? He nodded. The entire sub-basement level collapsed. Structural engineers are still trying to figure out how, The foundation of the whole building shifted. They've evacuated the top 3 floors as a precaution, including the 7th floor, apartments 712 and 713. All of the 7th floor, yes. Grayson studied me. What happened down there, Michael? What did you do? I told him everything, the phone call from Olivia, my decision to go to 713, the hole in the bedroom floor, the organic tunnels, the vast chamber with the pit. I described the entities surrounding it, Olivia's transformation, and my desperate attempt to close the door by destroying the symbols. Grayson listened without interruption, his expression giving nothing away. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You may have saved a lot of people, he said finally, including yourself. Then you believe me? You don't think it was all hallucination or delusion? I've worked at Blackstone Towers for almost 50 years, Michael. I've seen things that defy explanation, heard things that shouldn't be possible. He leaned forward. And I've seen what happens to people who spend too much time in apartment 713. What they become. Like Olivia, I murmured. Like Olivia. Like others before her. He shook his head. But nothing like what you described has ever happened before. A complete collapse of the sub-basement level? The foundation itself shifting? That's new. Is it over? I asked, the question that had been haunting me since I woke. Did I stop it? I don't know, Grayson admitted. The noises have stopped, at least for now. No more tapping. No more voices in the walls. But what? But whatever was down there, whatever's been trying to get through all these years, I don't think it's the kind of thing that gives up easily. He stood, moving to the window to look out at the city beyond. Maybe you've closed the door. Maybe you've just made it harder to open. So it could happen again? Perhaps. Not at Blackstone Towers. They're talking about condemning the building entirely. The foundation damage is too severe to repair economically. He turned back to face me. But somewhere else, maybe. Wherever the next door opens. I thought about this, about the implications. About other buildings, other people experiencing what I had experienced. About other Olivias, other Elizabeths. How will we know? How will we stop it? We'll know the same way we've always known. People will hear things in the walls, see things in events, feel things watching them when they should be alone. Grayson's face was grim. As for stopping it, well, you found a way. Others might too, if they're brave enough. Or desperate enough. He moved back to the chair and picked up a small duffel bag I hadn't noticed before. I brought you some clothes. And your phone, it was in your pocket when I found you. Miraculously unbroken. He set the bag on the bed. Your apartment is inaccessible now, but I managed to retrieve most of your belongings before they sealed the building. They're in storage. I'll give you the details once you're discharged. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved by his thoughtfulness. For everything. Grayson nodded. Just doing my job. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Though I'm not sure rescue tenant from interdimensional horror was in the original job description. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Mr. Grayson? What will you do now? If they condemn Blackstone Towers? Retire, I suppose. It's long overdue. He paused at the door. Maybe write my memoirs. 50 years as superintendent of a haunted building. Think it would sell? I couldn't help but smile. I'd buy a copy. After he left, I checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls and messages from work, from friends, from my ex-wife who had apparently heard about my accident. I would deal with them later. For now, I scrolled to my recent calls, looking for the unknown number that had called me that night. The night Olivia had reached out from whatever in-between place she had been trapped in. It wasn't there. No record of any call during that time period. I set the phone down, unsure whether to be relieved or disturbed by this omission. Perhaps it had never been a real phone call at all, but some other form of communication. Or perhaps my memory of events wasn't as reliable as I believed. The doctor had mentioned things I'd said while sedated, about people on the walls, about pits and symbols. She had attributed it to trauma-induced hallucination. The rational, logical part of my mind suggested that might be the correct explanation for everything I had experienced. But I knew better. I had the broken ribs and fractured wrist to prove it. I had Mr. Grayson's confirmation of what I'd seen and done. And I had the lingering certainty that I had faced something real, something ancient and patient and hungry, beneath Blackstone Towers. I was discharged 2 days later, having successfully avoided psychiatric consultation by presenting a calm, rational demeanor and attributing my sedated ramblings to painkiller-induced nightmares. I collected the keys to my storage unit from Mr. Grayson and found temporary accommodation in a hotel while I looked for a new apartment. Life began to resume its normal rhythms. I returned to work. I met with friends. I started apartment hunting, being particularly careful about the history and age of any building I considered. But at night, alone in my hotel room, I still sometimes woke at exactly 3:17, my heart racing, ears straining for the sound of tapping that never came. 3 weeks after my discharge from the hospital, I received a small package in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was vaguely familiar. Inside was a single item, a key on a plain ring, with a small metal tag attached. The tag bore a single word, mouth. I recognized it immediately as one of the keys from Mr. Grayson's ring, the one he had used to access the hidden basement level of Blackstone Towers. But why would he send it to me? The answer came a week later, in the form of a newspaper article. The headline was small, buried on page 6, former building superintendent found dead in condemned tower. According to the article, Mr. Grayson's body had been discovered in the sealed Blackstone Towers building, where he had apparently broken in despite the condemnation notices. The cause of death was listed as structural accident. He had fallen through a weakened floor into a previously unknown sub-basement area. The article mentioned that Mr. Grayson had worked at Blackstone Towers since its opening in 1978 and had no known family. It also noted, almost as an afterthought, that his body had been found in the basement room directly beneath what had once been apartment 713. I set the newspaper down, my hand shaking slightly. Why had Grayson gone back? What had he been looking for? And why had he sent me the key beforehand? The questions haunted me, but I had no way to answer them. Blackstone Towers was scheduled for demolition the following month. Whatever secrets remained within its walls would soon be buried under tons of rubble. Or maybe not. Maybe some things couldn't be destroyed so easily. A week after reading about Grayson's death, I began to dream. Not ordinary dreams, but vivid, hyperreal experiences that left me gasping awake each night, sheets soaked with sweat. In these dreams, I was back in the tunnels beneath Blackstone Towers, but they were changing, expanding. The organic walls pulsed with renewed vigor, and the symbols I had destroyed were slowly, painstakingly reforming themselves. And in every dream, Olivia waited for me at the edge of the pit, her form flickering between human and something else, her eyes reflecting golden in the darkness. "It's not over, Michael," she would say, her voice a chorus of whispers. "You didn't close the door. You merely pushed it shut, and now it's opening again." I tried to ignore the dreams, to dismiss them as trauma working its way through my subconscious. But they grew more intense, more insistent, until I could no longer deny the truth they were showing me. The key Grayson had sent was burning a hole in my drawer. I knew why he had gone back to Blackstone Towers. He had sensed it too, the door reopening, the barrier thinning. He had tried to stop it again, and it had cost him his life. Now it was up to me. The night before Blackstone Towers was scheduled for demolition, I returned. The building stood dark and empty, construction barriers surrounding its perimeter. Signs warned of danger, of imminent destruction. I ignored them all. The key worked smoothly in a service entrance, as if the lock had been recently oiled. Inside, the building was eerily silent, no creaking pipes, no settling foundation, no tapping in the walls. I made my way to the basement, guided by memory and the beam of my flashlight. The basement level had been heavily damaged in the collapse, but someone, Grayson, presumably had cleared a path through the debris. A path that led directly to the area beneath apartment 713. What I found there defied explanation. The room that had once contained the concrete pit was gone, replaced by a massive sinkhole that spiraled downward into darkness. The edges were smooth, as if melted rather than broken, and lined with faintly glowing symbols, new ones different from those I had destroyed. I stood at the edge, playing my flashlight over the spiraling descent, and knew with certainty that this was what Grayson had found. This was what had killed him. But unlike Grayson, I had been to the other side. I had seen the chamber with the pit. I had faced the entities that dwelled there. And most importantly, I had closed the door once before. I could do it again. I pulled from my backpack the items I had brought, not a crowbar this time, but a sledgehammer and a can of spray paint. I began by marking the symbols I could reach with bright red X's, studying their pattern, their relationship to each other. They formed a complex equation, a formula designed to weaken the barrier between worlds. Then, methodically, I began to destroy them, not by striking them directly as I had before, but by breaking the stone around them, disrupting their alignment, their perfect geometric harmony. With each blow of the sledgehammer, I felt resistance, not physical, but something deeper, more fundamental. The air thickened. The temperature dropped. And from deep within the sinkhole, I heard sounds, not tapping now, but a low, continuous moan, like wind through a massive pipe. I worked faster, destroying symbol after symbol, moving in a circle around the edge of the sinkhole. My arms ached, my broken ribs screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. I was nearly 3/4 of the way around when I heard her voice. "Michael." I turned, sledgehammer raised, to find Olivia standing on the opposite side of the sinkhole. She looked almost normal, her clothes clean, her hair neatly combed, her face free of the wild desperation I had last seen in the chamber below. But her eyes were still wrong, still golden, still reflecting light that wasn't there. "You can't stop it," she said, her voice gentle, almost sympathetic. "Not permanently. The door has been opening for centuries, in different places, different times. Westcliff Asylum, Blackstone Towers, whatever comes next." "I've stopped it before," I replied, tightening my grip on the sledgehammer. "Temporarily." She smiled, and for a moment, I glimpsed too many teeth. But every time it closes, it reopens stronger. The barrier grows thinner. The equation evolves, becomes more elegant, more efficient. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I feared I knew the answer. Because you have a choice, Michael. She extended her hand across the void between us. Join us. Be the doorkeeper instead of the one who closes doors. There's a place for you among us. A purpose. For a brief, terrible moment, I was tempted. I remembered the vastness of the chamber below, the pulsing red light, the sense of something ancient and powerful stirring in depths I couldn't fathom. To be part of that, to understand it. Then I remembered Elizabeth Chambers, catatonic in her nursing home. Mr. Grayson, crushed beneath the collapsing floors. All the tenants who had fled apartment 713, their lives forever changed by what they had experienced. No, I said simply, and brought the sledgehammer down on another symbol. Olivia's face twisted, her features shifting, flowing like wax under heat. Then you will fail, as all others have failed. And you will join us anyway, in the end. She stepped backward, into the shadows, and was gone. I returned to my work with renewed determination, destroying the remaining symbols as quickly as I could. The moaning from the depths grew louder, more frantic. The air around me vibrated with unseen energies. When I destroyed the final symbol, the effect was immediate. The sinkhole began to close, its edges flowing inward like liquid, the spiraling descent flattening into solid ground. The moaning cut off abruptly, replaced by a silence so profound it rang in my ears. I backed away, watching as the floor reformed itself, smooth and unbroken. Within minutes, there was no evidence that the sinkhole had ever existed, just a bare concrete floor, unmarked by symbols or cracks. I stood there for a long time, waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Another collapse? Olivia's return? Some sign that I had succeeded or failed? Nothing happened. The basement remained silent, empty. Finally, I turned and made my way back through the debris, up the stairs, and out of Blackstone Towers for the last time. As I passed through the service entrance, I removed the key and placed it carefully on a nearby ledge. Someone would find it eventually, after the building was demolished. Just another mysterious artifact from a troubled structure. The next day, I watched from a safe distance as Blackstone Towers was reduced to rubble. The controlled demolition went perfectly, the building collapsing inward upon itself, raising a cloud of dust that temporarily blocked out the sun. When the dust settled, nothing remained but a pile of broken concrete and twisted metal. Workers moved in immediately, loading the debris into trucks to be hauled away, clearing the site for whatever would be built next. I wondered if they would find anything unusual in the rubble. Any signs of the organic tunnels, the membranous walls, the glowing symbols. I doubted it. Whatever had existed beneath Blackstone Towers was gone now, or at least, no longer accessible from this world. In the months that followed, I tried to return to normal life. I found a new apartment, a modern building with no history, no secrets. I focused on my work, on rebuilding friendships that had suffered during my ordeal. I even began dating again. The dreams continued, but with decreasing frequency and intensity. Olivia appeared less often, her form less defined, her voice harder to understand. The tunnels in my dreams grew narrower, darker, more distant. I began to hope that it truly was over. That the destruction of Blackstone Towers had somehow severed the connection completely. That the door had not just been closed, but erased. Then, 6 months after the demolition, I received a text message from an unknown number, new development breaking ground at the old Blackstone site. Luxury apartments. Pre-sale begins next month. I deleted the message, blocked the number. But I knew, with a certainty that transcended logic or evidence, that it wasn't over. That Olivia had been right. The door had been opening for centuries, in different places, different times. Westcliff Asylum, Blackstone Towers, and now, whatever would be built on that cursed ground. I had a choice to make. I could walk away, try to forget, leave the next door for someone else to close. Or I could be there from the beginning, watching, waiting, ready to act when the tapping in the walls began again. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. I had closed the door twice now. I knew how to recognize the signs, how to fight what came through. Perhaps that was my purpose, not to be the doorkeeper Olivia had offered, but to be the one who kept the door shut. 1 week later, I submitted an application for a position with the construction company developing the Blackstone site. Building maintenance supervisor. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I dropped the application in the mail, I thought of Mr. Grayson, of his 50 years as superintendent of a haunted building. Of his final, fatal return to the place he had watched over for so long. Your turn now, I whispered to myself, and turned toward whatever waited in the future, in the foundations, in the walls, in the spaces between. The door would open again, and I would be ready. Have you ever felt that your reflection might not be following your movements exactly as it should? The first time I noticed something was wrong with my mirror was 3 days after moving into the apartment. It was an old building in the historic district, with high ceilings and ornate moldings that spoke of another era. The rent was surprisingly affordable, too affordable, I should have realized, but after my divorce from Richard, I desperately needed a fresh start somewhere far from our shared memories. I stood before the antique full-length mirror that came with the apartment, brushing my hair before bed. The mirror itself was beautiful in a haunting way, its frame carved with intricate patterns of vines and what appeared to be faces hidden among the foliage. The glass had that slight waviness that old mirrors often have, distorting reality just enough to make you look twice. As I raised my brush, I noticed a delay, so brief I thought I'd imagined it. My reflection's hand lifted a fraction of a second after mine. I blinked, paused, and tried again. Normal. Just tired, I reasoned, setting the brush down on the vanity. That night, I dreamed of corridors lined with mirrors, each showing a slightly different version of myself, some smiling while I wasn't, some with eyes that followed me as I moved past. The apartment itself was perfect in its imperfection. The wooden floors creaked with character. The radiators hissed and clanked, telling stories of countless winters past. But despite its charm, something felt off. The air seemed dense in certain corners of the room, particularly near the mirror. And sometimes, I could swear I caught the scent of a perfume I'd never worn, something floral with an undertone of decay. I tried to ignore these sensations as I settled into my new life. My job as a digital archivist allowed me to work remotely, which meant I spent most of my days alone in the apartment, scanning and cataloging old photographs and documents. It was during one of these ordinary afternoons that the next incident occurred. I was passing by the mirror on my way to the kitchen when movement caught my eye. I turned, expecting to see my reflection walking parallel to me. Instead, I was standing still, watching me with curious intensity. For one horrifying second, our eyes met, mine wide with shock, hers narrowed with something like recognition. I gasped and stumbled backward. My reflection did the same, a moment too late. Just my imagination, I whispered to the empty apartment. but goosebumps rose on my arms, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood at attention. That night, I covered the mirror with a sheet. I felt ridiculous, a grown woman afraid of her own reflection, but the unease wouldn't leave me. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of knocking sounds coming from behind glass surfaces. When I woke the next morning, the sheet had fallen to the floor. I told myself it had slipped. Old buildings settle. Drafts occur. But as I bent to pick it up, my eyes involuntarily darted to the mirror. My reflection was already looking at me, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Hello, Elizabeth," the reflection whispered, though my own lips hadn't moved. "I've been waiting for you." I screamed, but no sound came out. The world around me seemed to bend and distort, the walls of my apartment stretching and contracting like a living organism. The mirror's surface rippled like disturbed water, and I felt myself being pulled toward it by an invisible force. "Don't fight it," my reflection said, her voice both mine and not mine, familiar yet alien. "You've been running for so long. Who are you?" I managed to choke out. "I'm you," she replied, her smile widening to reveal teeth that seemed slightly too sharp. "Or rather, I'm the you that could have been, should have been, would be." I pressed my hands against the wall, trying to resist the pull of the mirror. "I don't understand. This mirror has been waiting for you, Elizabeth. It's been collecting fragments of souls for centuries, waiting for someone like you, someone walking the edge between worlds." Her eyes darkened. "Someone who's experienced loss so profound it's torn a hole in the fabric of your reality." Images flashed through my mind, Richard's betrayal, yes, but something deeper, something I buried so completely I'd convinced myself it never happened. "You remember, don't you?" my reflection taunted. "The accident. The rain-slicked roads. The headlights coming toward you." "No," I whispered, shaking my head violently. "That's not real. That never happened." But even as I denied it, memories began seeping through the cracks in my mind, the screech of tires, the shattering glass, a small voice calling out for me. "You drove that night," my reflection continued, her voice dropping to a hypnotic murmur. "You were angry, distracted. You didn't see the truck until it was too late. Stop it." I screamed, clapping my hands over my ears. "You survived." She didn't. The room spun around me as forgotten memories crashed through my carefully constructed walls. My daughter. My beautiful Lily. Her small body in the hospital bed, machines beeping in a rhythm that slowed until they finally stopped. "No," I sobbed, sinking to the floor. "No, no, no." "You couldn't face it," my reflection said, her voice suddenly gentle. "Your mind fractured. You created a new reality where she never existed. Where your divorce was about infidelity, not about a husband who couldn't look at you without seeing the woman who killed his child." I curled into myself on the hardwood floor, waves of grief crashing over me. How could I have forgotten my own daughter? What kind of monster was I? "Come to me," my reflection coaxed. "Step through the glass. On this side, you can see her again. On this side, you can make things right." Through my tears, I looked up at the mirror. Within its depths, I could see more than just my reflection now. I could see shadowy figures moving beyond her, and among them, a small silhouette that made my heart seize with recognition. "Lily?" I whispered. The figure stepped closer to the glass, and for a moment, I saw her pigtails, gap-toothed smile, the stuffed rabbit she was never without. "Mommy," came her voice, faint as a memory. I miss you. I rose to my feet, drawn to the mirror by a force more powerful than gravity. My fingers touched the cool surface of the glass, and instead of meeting resistance, they sank through as if into water. That's it, my reflection encouraged, extending her hand to mine. Come home. As our fingertips touched across the boundary between worlds, a jolt of electric coldness shot up my arm. The apartment around me began to fade, the colors leaching away until everything existed in shades of gray and shadow. Only the mirror remained vivid, a portal to somewhere else, somewhere where my greatest mistake could be undone. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a strange calm spreading through me. Perhaps this was madness. Perhaps this was death. Or perhaps, just perhaps, this was my chance to find my way back to what I'd lost. With one last look at the fading reality behind me, I stepped forward into the mirror, into the waiting arms of my other self. The glass closed behind me like water, leaving no trace of my passage. The apartment stood empty, silent but for the ticking of a clock and the faint, distant sound of a child's laughter. On the other side of the mirror, time moved differently. The first thing I noticed was the cold, not the biting cold of winter, but a deep, penetrating chill that seemed to seep into my bones. The world around me looked like my apartment, but with subtle wrongness that made my skin crawl. The colors were muted, shadows stretched too long across the floor, and all sounds had an echo that lingered just a beat too long. "Welcome home, Elizabeth," my reflection said, still holding my hand. Up close, I could see the differences between us more clearly. Her eyes were darker than mine, with something ancient swimming in their depths. Her smile never quite reached those eyes. "Where's Lily?" I demanded, pulling my hand away. The cold intensified the moment we broke contact. "All in good time," she said, gesturing around us. "First, you should understand where you are." "And where is that exactly?" My voice echoed strangely, as if I were speaking in a vast empty space rather than the confines of my apartment. "The in-between," she replied. "Not quite the world of the living, not quite elsewhere. It's a place where memories take form, where time folds back on itself." She ran her finger along the edge of a nearby table, leaving a faint trail of light in her wake. "Those of us who dwell here have many names, reflections, echoes, ghosts." I hugged myself against the cold. "And Lily? Is she a ghost too?" Something flickered across her face, an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "She's here. But finding her won't be as simple as you might hope." The apartment door stood ajar, revealing not the hallway of my building, but a corridor lined with doors of various sizes and styles, stretching farther than seemed physically possible. "What you need to understand," my reflection continued, "is that this place was once just a way station, a place for souls to pause on their journey elsewhere. But something became trapped here long ago, something that learned to feed on grief and regret." She looked at me meaningfully. "Something that's been waiting for someone like you." "I don't understand." "The entity that rules this place, we call it the Collector. It felt your pain from across the veil. It's been reaching out to you through the mirror, calling you here." She lowered her voice. "It wants to use you, Elizabeth. Your grief is particularly potent." A distant wailing sound echoed through the apartment, making me jump. It sounded like multiple voices crying out in anguish, the sound building and fading like waves on a shore. "What was that?" I whispered. "Others like you. Souls caught in the Collector's web." She moved toward the door. "Come. If you want to find Lily, we need to move quickly, before the Collector realizes you've crossed over." I followed her into the impossible corridor where doors of every description lined the walls. Some ornate with intricate carvings, others simple, some barely more than rough wooden planks, and others that appeared to be made of materials I couldn't identify. Each door leads to a memory, my reflection explained. Some are yours. Some belong to others who've been trapped here. The deeper we go, the farther back in time we travel. How do we find Lily's door? You'll know it when you see it. She paused, turning to face me. But I should warn you, the memories behind these doors aren't always accurate. The collector twists them, uses them to keep souls bound here. As we walked, I noticed photographs hanging on the walls between the doors. I stopped to examine one, gasping when I recognized myself as a child, standing beside my parents in front of our old house. But something was wrong. Shadowy figures stood behind us, their features blurred and distorted. Don't look too closely, my reflection warned, pulling me away. The photographs are traps too. We continued down the corridor, which began to curve gently to the left. The temperature dropped further, and I could see my breath fogging in the air before me. The lighting grew dimmer, the shadows between the doors deeper and more menacing. There, my reflection suddenly said, pointing ahead. Do you see it? At first, I didn't. Then I noticed a small door, painted pale pink with a child's drawing taped to it, a crayon rendering of a house with 4 stick figures standing in front, a man, a woman, a child, and a rabbit. My heart constricted painfully in my chest. Lily's drawing, I whispered. She made that the week before. I couldn't finish the sentence. My reflection nodded. This is her door. But before you open it, you need to know something. She grabbed my wrist, her touch sending painful needles of cold through my skin. Time works differently here. What feels like minutes on this side might be hours in your world. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave. I don't care, I said, reaching for the doorknob. I need to see her. Wait. Her grip tightened. The collector will use her to keep you here. You must remember what's real and what isn't. I pulled away from her. Why are you helping me? Who are you really? For a moment, something like sadness crossed her features. I'm what remains of the last woman who owned that mirror. Caroline Fletcher. I came looking for my son after he drowned in 1912. I've been trapped here ever since. Then why would I listen to you? You failed to escape. Because I want this to end, she said simply. If you can break the cycle, maybe we can all find peace. Before I could respond, a low rumbling sound shook the corridor. Dust rained down from above, and several of the photographs fell from the walls, their glass shattering on impact. It knows you're here, Caroline said urgently. We're out of time. I reached for the pink door's handle, but as my fingers touched the cool metal, the floor beneath us trembled violently. The corridor began to stretch and distort, the doors sliding farther apart as the walls elongated impossibly. No! Caroline cried out as the distance between us and Lily's door suddenly expanded, pushing it farther away. It's trying to separate us from the door. I started running toward the pink door, but the faster I ran, the farther away it seemed to get. The corridor twisted around me, the floor tilting at sickening angles. Photographs flew off the walls, swirling around me like autumn leaves in a windstorm. Elizabeth. Caroline's voice seemed distant now. Don't let it confuse you. Focus on Lily. Remember her face. I tried to picture my daughter, her freckled nose, her gap-toothed smile, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. But the details kept slipping away, replaced by distorted images from the swirling photographs. The rumbling grew louder, resolving into something that sounded almost like words. Mine. Stay. Mine. The floor gave way beneath me, and I was falling through darkness. Images flashed past, fragments of memories, some mine, some unknown, a beach vacation when Lily was 4, a Victorian-era funeral I'd never attended, my wedding day, a woman in old-fashioned clothes weeping by a river, the car accident, metal crushing metal, glass spraying across the wet road. I landed hard on a solid surface, the breath knocked from my lungs. When I could breathe again, I realized I was lying on the floor of what appeared to be a child's bedroom. The walls were painted soft yellow, and glow-in-the-dark stars dotted the ceiling. Lily's room. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. Lily? I called out, my voice shaking. Sweetheart, are you here? A movement in the corner caught my eye, a small figure sitting in a rocking chair, facing away from me. The back of a head with familiar brown pigtails. Lily? I whispered, taking a step forward. It's Mommy. The rocking chair creaked as it moved slowly back and forth. I approached cautiously, tears blurring my vision. 5 steps away. 4. 3. I've missed you so much, baby, I said, my voice breaking. 2 steps away. 1. I reached out, my hand trembling as I touched her small shoulder. Lily? The figure turned, and I recoiled in horror. It had Lily's face, but distorted, the eyes too large and entirely black, the mouth stretched in an impossible grin that split her face nearly in half, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Hello, Mommy, it said in a voice that was and wasn't my daughter's. You've been gone so long. Why did you leave me alone? I stumbled backward, knocking into a bookshelf. You're not her, I gasped. The thing wearing my daughter's face stood, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette controlled by unseen strings. Don't you love me anymore? It asked, cocking its head at an unnatural angle. Where is she? I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady. Where's my real daughter? The creature's grin widened impossibly further. I am real, Mommy. I'm what's left of her after you killed her. The words hit me like a physical blow. I pressed my back against the wall, shaking my head. No, that's not true. It was an accident. Was it? The thing asked, taking a step toward me. You were angry that night. Angry at Daddy. You drove too fast. You weren't watching the road. Memories flooded back, the argument with Richard, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly, rain lashing against the windshield, Lily's voice from the back seat asking me to slow down. No, I moaned, sliding down the wall until I sat on the floor. I didn't mean to hurt her. I loved her. If you loved me, you wouldn't have forgotten me, the creature said, now standing directly in front of me. Up close, I could see that its skin was translucent, with shadows moving beneath the surface. You locked me away in your mind. You erased me. Shame and grief washed over me in crushing waves. It was true. After the funeral, after Richard left, I had a breakdown. When I emerged from the hospital months later, I constructed a new reality for myself, one where Lily had never existed, where my marriage had ended for mundane reasons rather than tragic ones. I couldn't bear it, I whispered. The pain was too much. And now you want me back. The creature knelt before me, its black eyes reflecting my terrified face. How selfish you are, Mommy. You abandon me, then demand my return when it suits you. Please, I begged, tears streaming down my face. I just want to see her. The real Lily. Just once. The creature reached out with long, spindly fingers, brushing a tear from my cheek. Its touch burned like ice. The collector keeps her close. Its most precious possession. It leaned in, its breath cold against my ear. But I know where she is. Tell me, I pleaded. Follow the music box melody, it whispered. Follow it to the heart of the mirror maze. But be warned, once there, you may never leave. The creature pulled back, its face beginning to melt and shift, the features running like wax. Time to wake up now, Mommy, it said, its voice distorting. Someone's at your door. The room around me began to dissolve, colors running together, furniture melting into the floor. The last thing I saw was the creature's face, reforming into the visage of Caroline, my reflection, her eyes sad and knowing. Find the music box, her voice echoed as everything went dark. But don't trust what you see. I woke with a gasp, lying on the floor of my apartment. The mirror stood above me, its surface now solid and reflecting only the ceiling and my sprawled form. Outside, someone was knocking persistently on my apartment door. Elizabeth? Are you in there? A man's voice. Richard. I stumbled to my feet, glancing back at the mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw Caroline's face watching me from within the glass, her lips forming words I couldn't hear. The knocking continued. Elizabeth. Open up. We need to talk. I moved toward the door on shaky legs, my mind reeling. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination brought on by grief and denial? But as I reached for the doorknob, I noticed something clutched in my left hand, a small, tarnished silver key that I'd never seen before, with a musical note etched into its bow. Behind me, so faint I almost missed it, came the delicate first notes of a music box melody. Just a minute. I called to Richard, quickly hiding the silver key in my pocket. I glanced in the mirror one last time, nothing unusual now, just my disheveled reflection staring back with wide, frightened eyes. I opened the door to find my ex-husband standing there, looking as polished and put together as always in his charcoal suit. His expression, however, was anything but composed. Deep concerned lines creased his forehead, and the shadows under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. Richard, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What are you doing here? He studied my face intently. Your therapist called me. Dr. Keller said you've missed your last 3 appointments. I blinked in confusion. Therapist? I don't have a... The words died in my throat as another fragment of memory surfaced, sitting in a tastefully decorated office, a kind-faced woman with silver-streaked hair asking me about Lily, about the accident, about the gaps in my memory. Elizabeth? Richard's voice pulled me back to the present. Can I come in? We need to talk. I hesitated, then stepped aside. As Richard entered the apartment, his gaze immediately went to the antique mirror. Something like recognition flashed across his face. Where did this come from? He asked, his voice suddenly tense. It came with the apartment, I replied, watching his reaction carefully. Why? He approached the mirror cautiously, as if it might bite. There's something familiar about it. I could swear I've seen it before. A chill ran down my spine. That's impossible. I just moved in last week. Richard turned to face me, his expression grave. That's the other reason I'm here, Elizabeth. You didn't just move in. You've been living here for 7 months. The floor seemed to shift beneath my feet. What? No, that's not right. I just unpacked my last box 3 days ago. Elizabeth, he said gently, taking a step toward me. You've been saying that every week since you moved in. You unpack the same boxes over and over. You call your mother every Sunday as if you haven't spoken to her in months, though she just saw you on Friday. I sank onto the edge of the sofa, my legs suddenly unable to support me. That doesn't make any sense. Dr. Keller thinks it's a new manifestation of your dissociative episodes, Richard continued, sitting beside me but maintaining a careful distance. After Lily died, I created a new reality, I whispered, completing his sentence. One where she never existed. Richard looked startled. Yes, that's exactly what happened. But you've never been able to acknowledge it before. This is progress. I laughed bitterly. Progress. Is that what you call it when your ex-wife finally admits she erased her own daughter from her memory? Elizabeth, the accident wasn't your fault, Richard said, his voice gentle. The other driver was drunk. He ran a red light. There was nothing you could have done. I stared at him. What? But I thought. I was driving too fast, in the rain. No, Richard interrupted firmly. That's the false narrative you created. The accident happened on a clear day. You were stopped at a red light. The other driver hit you going 45 miles per hour. The doctor said Lily never felt any pain. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile these new facts with the distorted memories I'd been shown in the mirror world. If what Richard was saying was true, then the creature in Lily's bedroom had been lying, manipulating my guilt and confusion. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because Dr. Keller thinks you're getting worse, not better. These time loops you're experiencing, living the same week over and over, they're a sign that your mind is fragmenting further. He paused, looking uncomfortable. She thinks it might be time to consider inpatient treatment. You want to commit me? I asked incredulously. I want you to get help, he corrected. The kind of help I can't give you. His eyes strayed to the mirror again. And I want you to get rid of that thing. There's something wrong about it. As if in response to his words, I felt the key in my pocket grow suddenly cold, pressing against my thigh like an ice cube. At the same moment, the faint sound of a music box melody drifted through the apartment, though I couldn't pinpoint its source. Richard frowned. Do you hear that? So he could hear it too. Not a hallucination, then. Yes, I admitted. It started last night. He stood and began walking around the apartment, searching for the source of the music. As he moved away from me, I pulled out the silver key, examining it in the dim light. The musical note etched into its bow seemed to shimmer and shift, as if viewed underwater. I can't find where it's coming from, Richard said, returning to the living room. He stopped when he saw the key in my hand. What's that? I closed my fingers around the key. Just something I found in one of the moving boxes, I lied. Richard didn't look convinced, but he didn't press the issue. Will you at least call Dr. Keller? Talk to her about what's been happening? Yes, I said, knowing it was easier to agree than argue. I'll call her tomorrow. Today, Richard insisted gently. Call her today. After extracting several more promises from me that I'd call the therapist, that I'd consider inpatient treatment, that I'd let him check on me again tomorrow, Richard finally left. As soon as the door closed behind him, I leaned against it, exhaling shakily. What was real? My memories of the accident contradicted what Richard had told me. The creature in the mirror world had fed me a version that maximized my guilt, that I had been driving recklessly, that I had essentially killed my own child. But according to Richard, I'd been a victim too, stopped at a light when another driver hit us. And what about time? Had I really been living in this apartment for 7 months, stuck in some kind of weekly loop? The implications were terrifying. How much of my reality could I trust? The music box melody grew louder, pulling me from my thoughts. I followed the sound to the bathroom, where it seemed strongest. The bathroom mirror, an ordinary medicine cabinet mirror, reflected my pale face back at me. But as I watched, the reflection began to blur and shift, the familiar features dissolving until I was looking at Caroline's face instead of my own. Elizabeth, her voice emanated from the glass, distorted as if coming through water. You need to come back. Quickly. Why should I trust you? I demanded. Everything you showed me was a lie. Caroline's expression turned urgent. Not everything. The collector twists the truth, but it can't create something from nothing. Your daughter is here, Elizabeth. But not for much longer. What do you mean? Souls don't stay in the in-between forever, she explained. Eventually, they move on. Lily has been held here by your grief and denial, but now that you're beginning to remember the truth, her ties to this place are weakening. Fear gripped me. So I'm losing her again? Unless you find her and help her cross over properly, Caroline confirmed. The collector has been using her to draw you in, but it can't hold her forever. And the key? I asked, pulling it from my pocket. It opens the music box where the collector keeps its most precious memories, Caroline explained. Including Lily's. I studied her face, trying to determine if she was telling the truth. If I come back through the mirror, how do I know I'll be able to return to the real world? You don't, Caroline admitted. But which is worse, risking everything to help your daughter find peace, or staying safely in your fractured reality while she remains trapped? When she put it like that, there was no real choice at all. What do I need to do? I asked. Follow the music, Caroline instructed. It will lead you to the heart of the mirror maze. But be careful, the collector knows you have the key now. It will try to confuse you, to lead you astray. How will I know which way to go? Listen for Lily's voice beneath the melody, Caroline said, her image beginning to fade. She's trying to reach you too. Before I could ask anything else, the bathroom mirror returned to normal, showing only my own reflection once more. The music box melody continued, however, now seeming to emanate from the direction of the antique mirror in the bedroom. I returned to stand before it, steeling myself for what I needed to do. If Richard was right, and I'd been trapped in some kind of dissociative time loop for months, perhaps this journey through the mirror was itself a delusion. Perhaps I was already in a psychiatric hospital somewhere, lost in a complex hallucination. But if there was even the slightest chance that Lily needed me, that I could help her find peace, I had to try. I approached the mirror, watching as the surface once again began to ripple like disturbed water. The music grew louder, and beneath it, I thought I could hear a child's voice calling faintly, "Mommy, help me." Taking a deep breath, I pressed my hand against the glass. As before, it yielded like water, cold enveloping my fingers. I stepped forward, passing through the mirror's surface, leaving the solid reality of my apartment behind. The transition was more jarring this time. I felt as if I were being pulled apart and reconstructed, molecule by molecule. When the sensation passed, I found myself not in the distorted version of my apartment, but in what appeared to be a vast ballroom. Dozens of mirrors of all shapes and sizes lined the walls, each reflecting the room from a slightly different angle, creating a disorienting infinity of reflections. The music box melody echoed throughout the space, bouncing off the mirrors until it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. In the center of the ballroom stood a grand piano, its ivory keys moving on their own, though the sound it produced was definitely that of a music box, not a piano. I approached cautiously, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. As I drew near, the piano stopped playing, the keys freezing mid-note. The ensuing silence was so complete it felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast space. A movement in one of the mirrors caught my eye. I turned to see a small figure reflected in an ornate gold-framed mirror to my left, a little girl in a blue dress, her back to me, brown pigtails swinging as she skipped away from the glass. "Lily!" I cried out, running to the mirror. But when I reached it, the image had changed. Now it showed an empty corridor stretching into darkness. As I watched, the little girl appeared at the far end, still with her back to me, standing motionless. I pressed my hand against this mirror's surface, and it too yielded like water. Without hesitation, I stepped through into the corridor beyond. The air here was even colder than before, my breath forming thick clouds in front of me. The walls of the corridor were mirrored as well, creating endless reflections of myself stretching in all directions. "Lily?" I called again, my voice bouncing back at me from the mirrored surfaces. A giggle echoed from somewhere ahead, and I began walking toward it. The corridor seemed to stretch as I moved, the distance to the end remaining constant despite my progress. The mirrors along the walls began to show different images, scenes from my life, but distorted, twisted. In one, I saw myself arguing with Richard, my face contorted with rage as I screamed words I couldn't hear. In another, I was standing by a grave, laughing hysterically while those around me wept. In a third, I was driving, deliberately aiming my car at an oncoming truck, Lily's terrified face visible in the rearview mirror. "None of this is real," I muttered to myself, forcing my eyes forward, away from the disturbing images. "The collector is trying to confuse me." The music box melody started again, faint at first but growing louder as I continued down the endless corridor. Listening carefully, I thought I could hear Lily's voice beneath the notes, calling for me. Suddenly, the corridor split into 3 identical passageways. The music seemed to be coming from all 3 directions at once. I closed my eyes, trying to focus only on Lily's voice beneath the melody. There, from the right-hand passage, I could hear her more clearly. I took the right-hand corridor, which immediately began to curve downward in a gentle spiral. The mirrors here showed happier scenes, Lily's 5th birthday party, the day we brought home a rabbit, family trips to the beach. But even these beautiful memories were slightly wrong. In each one, my eyes were completely black, like those of the creature that had impersonated Lily. The spiral continued downward, the temperature dropping with every step until I was shivering uncontrollably. The music grew louder, and with it, Lily's voice became clearer. "Mommy, I'm scared. Please hurry." The spiral finally ended at a small circular chamber. In the center stood a pedestal, and on the pedestal sat an ornate silver music box, its lid closed, yet somehow still producing the melody that had guided me here. I approached slowly, drawing the key from my pocket. As I did so, the music box's melody stuttered, then stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. The music box itself was beautiful, silver filigree depicting scenes of dancers in an endless waltz, small gemstones that caught what little light existed in this chamber, glowing with an inner fire. Along the seam where the lid met the base, I could see a tiny keyhole. My hand trembled as I raised the key. Something felt wrong, too easy, perhaps. I had expected the collector to guard its treasures more fiercely. "Mommy, please." Lily's voice came urgently from inside the box. "Open it. I'm trapped." I hesitated, remembering Caroline's warning, "Don't trust what you see." The creature that had worn Lily's face had lied to me, twisted my memories to maximize my guilt. What if this was another deception? "Lily?" I called softly. "If it's really you, tell me something only you would know." A pause, then, "Mr. Flopsy has a tear in his left ear that Grandma sewed up, but she used blue thread instead of brown, and you said he looked like he had a lightning bolt, like Harry Potter." My breath caught. The detail about her stuffed rabbit was correct, specific and intimate in a way no one could have fabricated. With renewed determination, I inserted the key into the music box's lock and turned it. The lid sprang open, but instead of the expected dancing figurine, a blinding light erupted from within, enveloping me completely. The floor beneath my feet vanished, and I was falling, or perhaps flying, through a tunnel of swirling mirrors, each reflecting a different memory. I landed hard on a wooden floor, the breath knocked from my lungs. When I could see again, I found myself in a familiar room, Lily's bedroom, but the real one this time, not the distorted version I'd seen earlier. The yellow walls, the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the bookshelf filled with her favorite stories, all exactly as they had been before the accident. And there, sitting on her bed, was Lily. My Lily, not the horrifying creature with needle teeth and black eyes, but my daughter, looking just as she had the day of the accident. Her brown hair in pigtails, her favorite blue dress, her stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. "Lily?" I whispered, afraid to move, afraid this vision would dissolve if I disturbed it. She looked up, her eyes, her normal, beautiful brown eyes, widening in recognition. "Mommy? Is it really you this time? This time?" I asked, taking a cautious step forward. She nodded solemnly. "The bad thing keeps pretending to be you, but its eyes are wrong, and it doesn't know our special handshake." My heart constricted painfully in my chest. Our special handshake, a complicated series of slaps, fist bumps, and finger wiggles that we'd invented one rainy afternoon. "Can I come closer?" I asked, still not quite trusting this reality. Lily nodded, watching me carefully. I approached the bed slowly and sat on the edge, keeping a small distance between us. Up close, I could see that she was slightly translucent, the pattern of the bedspread visible through her form. "You're really here," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "The bad thing said you forgot me." Shame washed over me. "I did, for a while," I admitted. "After the accident, after you left us, I couldn't bear the pain. My mind tried to protect me by making me forget. But I never really did, not in my heart." Lily considered this, her small face serious. "Is that why you didn't come find me sooner?" "Yes, sweetheart. And I'm so sorry." Tears filled my eyes, blurring my vision. "If I had known you were here, waiting, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you." She scooted closer to me on the bed. "The bad thing keeps me locked in here. It looks like a person sometimes, but sometimes it's just shadows all smushed together. The collector, I murmured. Lily nodded. It says I have to stay here because you're coming back for me, but if I wait too long, I'll never be able to leave. She looked around the room fearfully. I don't like it here anymore, Mommy. It's cold, and the walls move when I'm not looking, and sometimes I hear other kids crying, but I can't find them. I'm going to get you out of here, I promised. We're going to find a way for you to move on, to go where you're supposed to be. Heaven? She asked simply. I swallowed hard. Yes, sweetheart. Heaven. Lily considered this, hugging her rabbit tighter. Will you come with me? The question pierced my heart. I can't, baby. Not yet. But someday, when it's my time, I'll find you there. Promise? I promise. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. How do we get out? The door disappears when I try to open it. I glanced at the bedroom door, solid looking now, but if what Lily said was true, it might vanish the moment we approached it. I think we need to find another way out. As if in response to my words, the music box melody began again, this time coming from beneath Lily's bed. We both froze, listening. It's coming, Lily whispered, her eyes wide with fear. What's coming? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The bad thing. The collector. She clutched my arm, her touch cold but solid. It knows you found me. It's angry. The floor beneath us trembled, and the walls of the bedroom began to warp and distort, stretching in impossible directions. The music grew louder, more frantic, discordant notes mixing with the once sweet melody. Under the bed, Lily said urgently, pulling me toward it. There's a way out. I found it once, but I was too scared to go alone. We dropped to our hands and knees, peering under the bed. Where there should have been just floor and darkness, there was instead what appeared to be a trapdoor, glowing with soft blue light around its edges. Quick, I urged, reaching for the metal ring set into the trapdoor's surface. I pulled, and it swung open easily, revealing not floor below, but a starry expanse, as if we were looking down into the night sky. The bedroom door burst open, and I looked up to see a mass of writhing shadows filling the doorway, multiple faces momentarily forming in the darkness before dissolving back into the chaotic whole. In the center of the mass, two glowing red eyes fixed on us with malevolent intelligence. Mine, thundered a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The child is mine. Go! I shouted to Lily, helping her to the opening. Jump through. Not without you, she cried, clinging to my arm. The shadow mass surged into the room, tendrils of darkness reaching for us. The temperature plummeted, frost forming instantly on every surface. We go together, I decided, holding Lily close. On 3. 1, 2, 3. We jumped into the starry void beneath the trapdoor, the collector's howl of rage following us as we fell. The sensation was not one of plummeting but of floating, drifting gently through star-filled space. Lily held tightly to me, her form growing more translucent by the second. Mommy, she said, her voice now sounding distant despite her closeness. I can feel it, the other side. It's warm there. And bright. I could feel her slipping away, not physically, but on some other level, her soul loosening its ties to the in-between. It's okay, baby, I said through my tears. You can go. You don't have to stay for me anymore. But I don't want to leave you, she whispered. You're not leaving me, I assured her. You're just going ahead. I'll catch up someday. She looked at something beyond me, something I couldn't see. Her face lit up with wonder. "It's beautiful, Mommy. And I think I see Grandpa waiting. My father, who had passed away when Lily was just 2. Tell him I love him," I said, my voice breaking. Lily was fading now, her form becoming almost completely transparent. "I will." She reached up, placing a ghostly hand against my cheek. I could barely feel it, like the brush of a butterfly's wing. "I love you, Mommy. And Daddy too. Tell him it wasn't his fault either. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in this world or the next." She smiled, and in that smile was a wisdom far beyond her 6 years. "I know. That's why I can go now. Because you remember me, and you love me, and that's stronger than the bad thing's power." With those words, she faded completely from my sight, leaving me floating alone in the starry void. But the space around me didn't feel empty, it felt full of light and warmth and love. For a moment, just a moment, I felt Lily's presence everywhere around me, inside me, a complete connection unrestricted by physical form. Then that too faded, and I was falling again, this time faster, tumbling through darkness until I slammed back into my body with such force that I gasped aloud. I was lying on the floor of my apartment, directly in front of the antique mirror. The glass surface was now completely shattered, shards scattered across the hardwood floor around me. Of Caroline, the in-between, and the collector, there was no sign. As I slowly sat up, wincing at the various aches in my body, I noticed something clutched in my hand, Mr. Flopsy, Lily's stuffed rabbit, worn and well-loved, with a distinctive blue lightning bolt stitching on his left ear. Proof that it hadn't all been a delusion. Proof that I had found my daughter and helped her find peace. The apartment door opened, and Richard stood there, key in hand, concern etched on his face. "Elizabeth? Are you okay?" "I've been knocking for—" He stopped when he saw the shattered mirror, then his eyes fell on the stuffed rabbit in my hands. His face went absolutely white. "Is that— where did you get that?" I looked up at him, tears streaming down my face, but these were not entirely tears of grief. "She's at peace now, Richard. Our little girl is at peace. And she wanted you to know that it wasn't your fault either." He sank to his knees beside me, reaching with trembling hands for Mr. Flopsy. As his fingers touched the worn fabric, something shifted in his eyes, a burden lifting, a wound beginning, at long last, to heal. The music box melody played one final time, so faint I almost missed it. But this time, it sounded like a lullaby, gentle and reassuring. A goodbye, and a promise of reunion, someday in the distant future. 1 month after my journey through the mirror, I still couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment. Not because I was trapped in a dissociative time loop as Richard and Dr. Keller had feared, but because something kept me tethered to this place, something unfinished. The shattered mirror had been removed, its fragments carefully collected and disposed of. But its absence left a shadow on the wall, a darker rectangle against the faded wallpaper that seemed to draw my eye no matter where I stood in the room. Sometimes, in the right light, I thought I could see movement within that shadow, ripples, like disturbed water. Richard visited regularly, bringing groceries and checking on my progress. He had been stunned by my sudden clarity regarding Lily's death, and even more shocked by the appearance of Mr. Flopsy, which had been buried with our daughter. Dr. Keller called it a breakthrough, though she remained skeptical about my metaphysical explanation for how I've recovered the toy in my memories. I didn't care if they believed me. I knew what had happened, and more importantly, I knew Lily was at peace. But there were others who weren't. At night, I would hear them, faint whispers, distant crying, the occasional tap on a window or creak of a floorboard in an empty room. The apartment building itself seemed to be a thin spot between worlds, a place where the veil between the living and what lay beyond was permeable. "They're still trapped there," I told Richard one evening as we sat drinking tea in my living room. In the in-between. He looked uncomfortable, as he always did when I spoke of my experience in the mirror world. "Elizabeth, Dr. Keller says it's important that you—" "I know what Dr. Keller says," I interrupted. "That I created an elaborate coping mechanism to process my grief. That the mirror world was a metaphor my mind constructed to allow me to say goodbye to Lily." I set down my teacup firmly. "But that doesn't explain Mr. Flopsy, does it?" Richard had no answer for that. None of them did. "There are others trapped there," I continued. "Like Caroline. Souls caught by the collector, unable to move on. And what exactly do you think you can do about that?" Richard asked, concern evident in his voice. I hesitated, then decided to show him. I went to my bedroom and returned with a small notebook in which I'd been recording my research. Over the past month, I'd become obsessed with the history of the apartment building and the antique mirror that had been my portal to the in-between. The mirror belonged to Caroline Fletcher, I explained, showing him the newspaper clippings I'd printed from the city's historical archives. She lived in this very apartment building in the early 1900s. Her son drowned in a river nearby, and afterward, she became reclusive, claiming she could see her son in mirrors around the apartment. Eventually, she disappeared, but police reports says she simply vanished from a locked apartment. Richard flipped through my notes with a deepening frown. "And you believe she was trapped in this mirror world?" "I know she was," I said firmly. "I met her there. And she's not the only one. Look at this." I showed him another article, this one more recent, from the 1970s. Gregory Winters, previous tenant of this very apartment, reported seeing his deceased wife in the bathroom mirror for weeks before he, too, disappeared without a trace. Elizabeth. And here, I continued, pulling out another article from the 80s. Melissa Chen, art student, moved into this apartment, became obsessed with painting mirrors, then vanished, leaving behind only a final canvas showing what she called the world beyond the glass. Richard set down the notebook. "This is concerning Elizabeth. You're constructing connections where there might not be any." "There's more," I insisted. "The building itself sits on land that once housed a Victorian-era photography studio. The owner specialized in spirit photography, those fake photos with ghostly images superimposed over portraits of the living. Except I don't think all of his photos were fake. I think he found a way to actually capture souls through his camera, and those souls became trapped when the studio burned down in 1892. "That's quite a leap," Richard said gently. "Is it? Look at what the studio was called." I pointed to a faded advertisement I'd found in the archives. Richard squinted at it. "Collector's Studio of Spirit Photography." A chill passed between us as the name hung in the air. "It can't be coincidence," I said. "The entity in the mirror called itself the Collector. It feeds on grief and regret, using mirrors as portals to draw on the living who are mourning their dead." Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he always made when stressed. "Even if, and this is a huge if, what you're saying is true, what do you plan to do about it? The mirror is gone." "The mirror was just one portal," I said. "There are others. The bathroom mirror, for one. Caroline spoke to me through it." "You want to go back?" Richard asked incredulously. after barely escaping the first time? I need to finish what I started, I said, my voice firm with resolve. The collector still has Caroline and who knows how many others. They deserve to be free, just like Lily. Richard stood up, pacing the small living room. This is madness, Elizabeth. You're finally healing from Lily's death. Why risk everything on this fantasy? Because it's not a fantasy, I said quietly. And because I made a promise. I hadn't told Richard about the dreams that had begun shortly after my return, dreams in which Caroline appeared, guiding me through endless corridors of mirrors, teaching me how to recognize the signs of the collector's influence, explaining how the in-between worked. Each night, I learned more about the nature of the mirror world and how to navigate it without losing myself. I'm not going to try to stop you, Richard finally said. I know better than that. But I'm worried about you, Elizabeth. Very worried. After he left, I continued with my preparations. Caroline had explained that the collector was weakened by my success in freeing Lily, but it was already regaining strength, feeding on the grief of others in the building. There was a narrow window of opportunity where it might be vulnerable enough to defeat. That night, I set my alarm for 3 a.m., what Caroline called the thin hour, when the barrier between worlds was at its weakest. I placed candles around the bathroom, arranging them in the pattern Caroline had shown me in my dreams. Between each candle, I set a small mirror, angled so that they reflected each other in an endless loop. At precisely 3 a.m., I lit the candles and stood before the bathroom mirror. The air felt heavy, charged with electricity. My breath fogged the glass, though the bathroom was not particularly cold. Caroline, I called softly. I'm ready. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, my reflection began to change, features shifting until Caroline's face looked back at me from the glass. Elizabeth, she said, her voice distant but clear. You came. I promised I would, I replied. Tell me what to do. The collector is hunting for you, she warned. It knows you helped Lily escape. It will try to trap you here permanently this time. I understand the risk, I said, but I can't leave you and the others trapped there. Caroline's expression softened. You remind me of myself when I first came looking for my Henry. So determined, so fearless. A shadow crossed her face. That's why the collector was able to ensnare me so easily. This time will be different, I assured her. I know what to expect now. Do you? Caroline asked. The in-between changes. It adapts. And the collector has had decades to perfect its traps. Just tell me how to help you cross over, I insisted. Caroline sighed, a sound like wind through autumn leaves. The collector keeps our anchors, objects from our lives that tether our souls to the in-between. For your daughter, it was her rabbit. For me, she hesitated. For me, it's my locket. The one with Henry's picture inside. Where is it? In the heart of the mirror maze, she replied. Where you found the music box. But the maze has changed since you were last there. The collector has made it more complex, more disorienting. I'll find it, I promised. There's more, Caroline continued urgently. The others, Gregory, Melissa, all of us, we each have an anchor. You'll need to find them all if you want to free everyone. How many are there? Dozens, Caroline admitted. The collector has been at this for a very long time. I felt a flutter of doubt. Finding Lily had nearly destroyed me. Could I really navigate the treacherous mirror world long enough to locate dozens of anchoring objects? Caroline seemed to sense my hesitation. You don't have to do it all at once, she said gently. Each soul freed weakens the collector further. Start with me. Then Gregory. Then Melissa. One by one, we can break its hold on this place. I nodded, resolve strengthening once more. How do I enter? Place your hands on the mirror, Caroline instructed. But before you do, there's something you should know. Time flows differently in the in-between, as you discovered. What feels like hours here might be days in your world. She paused. If you stay too long, your body in the real world could suffer. I understand, I said, though a chill ran through me at the thought. One more thing, Caroline added. Bring salt. The collector cannot cross a line of salt. It might buy you precious seconds if you're cornered. I nodded, grateful for the advice. From my pocket, I produced a small vial of salt I prepared earlier. Are you ready? Caroline asked. I took a deep breath. Yes. Then come through, she said, her image rippling like a reflection in disturbed water. I'll meet you on the other side. I placed my palms against the cool surface of the mirror. As before, the glass yielded like water, enveloping my hands in icy cold. I leaned forward, pushing my face through the surface, feeling that strange sensation of being pulled apart and reconstructed. The transition was rougher this time, leaving me gasping and disoriented as I fully emerged into the in-between. I found myself not in the ballroom where I'd arrived previously, but in what appeared to be a Victorian-era photography studio. Heavy velvet curtains hung along the walls, and ornate cameras on wooden tripods stood in various corners. The air smelled of chemicals, developing fluid and fixative. Caroline? I called softly, turning in a slow circle. Here, came her voice from behind a curtain. She emerged, looking more solid than she had in the mirror, though still slightly translucent around the edges. She wore a high-collared dress typical of the early 20th century, her hair pinned up in an elegant bun. Around her neck was a thin chain, but the locket that should have hung from it was missing. This place, I said, gesturing around us. This is the photography studio, isn't it? The collector's original lair. Caroline nodded. Before it burned. Before it learned to use mirrors as portals. She approached me, stopping just short of arm's reach. Thank you for coming back for us. Can you tell me more about the collector? I asked. What exactly is it? A shadow passed over Caroline's face. It was human once, I think. The photographer, Anderson Blackwood. He was obsessed with capturing souls, believing that a person's essence could be preserved in silver nitrate if exposed at the moment of death. She shuddered. He performed terrible experiments in the basement of this studio. And when the studio burned, his body died, but his consciousness survived, twisted and warped by his obsession. He became what he had sought to create, a collector of souls, using grief as his lure. I glanced around the studio, half expecting to see the shadow creature emerge from behind the curtains. How do we find your locket? This way, Caroline said, leading me toward a door at the back of the studio. But be careful. Nothing here is as it seems. She opened the door, revealing not a hallway or another room, but a vast expanse of mirrors arranged in concentric circles, a labyrinth of reflective surfaces stretching as far as the eye could see. Each mirror was different, some ornate with gilded frames, others simple and austere, some cracked or clouded with age, others perfectly clear. The mirror maze, I breathed. It's grown since you were last here, Caroline said grimly. The collector has been busy. We stepped into the maze together, the door closing behind us with an ominous click. Immediately, I felt disoriented. Each mirror reflected not only us but the other mirrors, creating an infinite regression of reflections that made it impossible to tell which way was forward and which was back. Stay close to me, Caroline warned. If we get separated, the collector will try to use my appearance to trick you. How will I know it's really you? I asked. Ask me about the day Henry died, she replied. Only I know the truth of what happened that day. I nodded, filing this information away. Which way do we go? Caroline hesitated, looking around at the bewildering array of reflections. The maze shifts and changes. It's different every time I enter. But my locket always pulls me in a certain direction. She closed her eyes, seeming to listen to something I couldn't hear. This way, she finally said, pointing to a path between two tall mirrors. We began making our way through the labyrinth, each turn bringing us to new corridors of mirrors. Some showed only our reflections, while others displayed scenes that made my skin crawl, dark waters closing over a small boy's head, a man slitting his wrists in a bathtub, a young woman painting frantically, her canvas depicting the very mirror maze in which we now stood. Don't look too closely, Caroline cautioned when she caught me staring at one particularly disturbing image. The mirrors try to draw you in, to trap your attention until the collector arrives. I tore my gaze away, focusing instead on the path ahead. How much farther? I don't know, Caroline admitted. Distance is fluid here. We continued in silence for what felt like hours, the maze growing colder with each turn we took. My breath formed clouds in front of my face, and my fingers grew numb despite being tucked into my pockets. We're getting closer, Caroline whispered, her own form seeming to grow more substantial as we progressed. I can feel the locket. The mirrors around us changed, becoming taller and more ornate, their surfaces clouded with frost patterns that shifted and moved as we passed. In some, I caught glimpses of the shadow creature, the collector, moving parallel to our path, watching us with those glowing red eyes. It knows we're here, I murmured. Yes, Caroline agreed. But it's being cautious. Your victory with Lily has made it wary of confronting you directly. We rounded another corner and found ourselves in a circular chamber ringed with 12 identical mirrors. In the center of the chamber stood a small pedestal, and on the pedestal rested a silver locket. There, Caroline breathed, her voice trembling with emotion. My anchor. I approached the pedestal cautiously, expecting some kind of trap. The locket was beautiful in its simplicity, a small silver oval on a delicate chain. Is this really it? I asked, surprised that something so precious would be left so exposed. Yes, Caroline confirmed, taking a step toward it. Henry gave it to me on our wedding day. His picture is inside. As she reached for the locket, all 12 mirrors around the chamber suddenly darkened, their surfaces turning black as pitch. From each mirror, a tendril of shadow emerged, snaking toward us with predatory intent. The salt, Caroline cried. Use the salt. I fumbled in my pocket, withdrawing the vial with shaking fingers. As the shadow tendrils converged on us, I uncapped the vial and poured a circle around Caroline and myself. The shadows recoiled when they encountered the salt barrier, hissing like water on hot coals. It won't hold for long, Caroline warned. Take the locket, quickly. I lunged forward, snatching the locket from the pedestal. The moment my fingers closed around it, The chamber plunged into absolute darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the salt circle around us. "Give it to me," Caroline urged, extending her hand. I hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Something felt wrong. "Tell me about the day Henry died," I said, remembering her test. Caroline's expression flickered, impatience crossing her features before being replaced by sorrow. "He drowned in the river." I was supposed to be watching him, but I was distracted, writing a letter. By the time I noticed he was gone, it was too late. I pulled the locket closer to my chest. "That's not Caroline's story." The figure before me snarled, its face melting and reforming into the writhing mass of shadows I recognized as the Collector. "Clever girl," it hissed in a voice like breaking glass. "But not clever enough." The salt circle flared brightly, then began to dim as the Collector pressed against it, testing its strength. Beyond the failing barrier, more shadows gathered, watchful and hungry. "Where is Caroline?" I demanded. "What have you done with her?" The Collector laughed, a sound that sent ice through my veins. "She never left the studio. That was merely the first test, to see if you would follow blindly." I clutched the locket tighter, my mind racing. If this entire journey through the maze had been an illusion, then the real Caroline was still back in the photography studio. And this locket. I looked down at the silver oval in my hand. As I watched, it began to change, the metal darkening and twisting until I held not a locket but a small silver key, identical to the one that had opened the music box containing Lily's memory. "You cannot free them," the Collector said, its form solidifying until it resembled a tall, gaunt man in Victorian clothing, his face a blur of shadow except for those burning red eyes. "They belong to me. Their grief, their regret, it sustains me." The salt circle was fading rapidly now, the barrier weakening with each passing second. I needed to act, but what could I do against this creature that controlled the very reality around us? Then I remembered what Caroline had told me in our dream conversations, the in-between response to belief and memory. It's shaped by thought as much as by the Collector's will. If the maze was an illusion, perhaps I could break it by refusing to believe in it. I closed my eyes, focusing all my concentration on the photography studio where we had started. I pictured it in perfect detail, the velvet curtains, the antique cameras, the chemical smell in the air. I imagined Caroline waiting there, trapped and afraid. "What are you doing?" the Collector demanded, its voice sharpening with alarm. I didn't answer, pouring all my will into rejecting the reality of the mirror maze. In my mind's eye, I saw the studio door, saw myself walking through it, saw Caroline turning to greet me. The floor beneath my feet seemed to shift and ripple. The Collector howled in rage, the sound distorting and fading as if being pulled away by an invisible force. The darkness around me lightened, colors bleeding back into my closed-eye vision. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in the Victorian photography studio, exactly as I had left it. And there was Caroline, slumped against one of the velvet curtains, her form flickering like a candle in a draught. "Elizabeth," she whispered, her voice faint. "You saw through it." I rushed to her side, showing her the key in my palm. "This isn't your locket." "No," she agreed weakly. "The Collector tried to trick you. If you had given me that key, it would have locked me here permanently." "Where's your real locket?" I asked. Caroline's gaze shifted to one of the cameras in the corner of the room, an ornate brass contraption on a wooden tripod. "There. He keeps our anchors close to him, hidden in plain sight." I approached the camera cautiously. It looked ordinary enough, if antique, but as I drew nearer, I noticed something hanging from the lens, a small silver locket. I reached for it, half expecting another trap, but my fingers closed around cool metal without incident. I brought the locket back to Caroline, placing it in her translucent palm. "Is this it? The real one?" She nodded, tears filling her eyes as she cradled the locket. "Yes. Oh, yes." With trembling fingers, she opened it, revealing a tiny sepia photograph of a young boy with bright eyes and a mischievous smile. "My Henry." As she gazed at the picture, her form began to grow more solid, more vibrant. Light seemed to emanate from within her, breaking through the translucent quality of her appearance until she looked almost alive again. "What's happening?" I asked. "My anchor," she explained, her voice stronger now. "By returning it to me, you've broken the collector's hold." The studio around us began to shake, dust raining down from the ceiling. The velvet curtains billowed as if caught in a strong wind, though there was no breeze. "It knows," Caroline said urgently. "It's coming. You need to leave, now, before it traps you here." "But what about you?" I protested. "And the others?" Caroline smiled, a peaceful expression transforming her features. "I can move on now, thanks to you. And you've weakened the collector significantly. When you're ready, you can return for the others." The shaking intensified, cracks appearing in the walls and ceiling. Through the cracks, I could see not building materials, but swirling darkness, punctuated by flashes of red light. "Go," Caroline urged, pushing me toward the mirror through which I'd entered. "Use the key. It will open your way home." I fumbled with the silver key, pressing it against the surface of the portal mirror. The glass rippled, then parted like curtains, revealing the familiar interior of my bathroom beyond. "Thank you," Caroline called as I stepped through the opening, "for not forgetting us." The last thing I saw before the mirror sealed behind me was Caroline surrounded by golden light, her form dissolving not into shadow, but into radiance as she finally, after a century of waiting, joined her son in whatever lay beyond the in-between. I collapsed onto my bathroom floor, shivering violently as if I'd been submerged in ice water. The candles still flickered around me, their flames dancing in the pre-dawn darkness. My fingers were clenched tightly around Caroline's silver key, its metal warm against my skin despite the chill that pervaded the rest of my body. For several minutes, I simply lay there, catching my breath, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. Caroline was free. She had moved on, joining Henry in whatever peaceful existence awaited beyond the in-between. But there were others still trapped, Gregory, Melissa, and dozens more souls caught in the collector's web. When I finally found the strength to stand, I noticed something had changed in the bathroom mirror. Where before it had shown only my ordinary reflection, now I could see faint lines crisscrossing its surface, like a map etched in light. Names appeared briefly before fading: Gregory Winters, Melissa Chen, Thomas Blackwood, Sarah Miller. Each name connected to an object, a location within the apartment building. I understood then that Caroline had left me a guide, a way to find the other anchors. The collector was weakened, but not defeated. And I had made a promise. As dawn broke, painting the bathroom in pale golden light, I reached for my phone and called Richard. "Elizabeth?" His voice was groggy with sleep. "I did it," I told him. "I freed Caroline." There was a long pause before he replied. Are you okay?" "Yes," I said, and realized it was true. For the first time since Lily's death, I felt a sense of purpose, of clarity. But there's more work to be done. and I think I'm going to need your help. Another pause, longer this time. Then, tell me what you need. Outside my window, the city was waking up, unaware of the battle that had been fought in the spaces between mirrors, in the shadowy realm where grief and memory collided. But I knew, and now Richard did too. And together, we would free the others, one by one, weakening the collector until it could no longer prey on the bereaved and broken-hearted. As I set the silver key on my bedside table, I thought I heard the faint melody of Lily's music box one last time, not a sad song of loss, but a gentle reminder that love transcends boundaries, even the boundary between life and death. I touched the worn fur of Mr. Flopsy, Lily's faithful companion who had made the journey back with me. "Thank you for showing me the way," I whispered, not just to the stuffed rabbit, but to my daughter, to Caroline, to all those who had helped me find my path through grief toward purpose. The war against the collector had only just begun, but for the first time in years, I felt ready for the fight. Not just for Lily's sake, but for all those who had been ensnared by grief's sharp claws. After all, some battles are worth fighting, even when they take you to the darkest places. Especially then. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.